Grant as well. Joe Theismann will join us at 11 to preview the two games, and we'll get Joe's thoughts on David Blau and the defensive coordinator search. Denton will be with us for one final time this year to talk some college football, look back on Monday night. Biggest audience, TV audience for a championship game ever. And it was a great game. And I think the buildup for the game with the Indiana story and the Miami, felt kind of new, too. It wasn't Bama versus somebody or Georgia versus somebody. But we'll look back on Monday night and then look ahead to next year and how long of a run Indiana might have. So Denton will join us at 11:40. Ben will join us at 12 with the latest on the defensive coordinator search. And then, again, Doug Kammerer at 12:30. So that's what we have today. So I was thinking, and we kind of talked about this a little bit yesterday with Keim when John was on. Man, Washington's in a bit of a pickle here right now as it relates to the defensive coordinator search, because there are just so many openings, so many opportunities. I mean, you have all of the new coaches and new spots that have to add offensive and defensive coordinators. You've got the teams that didn't make head coaching changes, but still have to add defensive coordinators. We have one of those teams in our own division. The Dallas Cowboys are looking for a new defensive coordinator. And, in ranking sort of the idea of one through whatever, in terms of desires, it's very possible because of the competitive landscape for the team. This is going to be a true example. The Quinn example was just fake news. That he was not their fifth choice, not their third choice. He was always, from the moment they interviewed him, very much at the top. Maybe there were others that were going to be close based on future interviews, but they never got to interview Ben Johnson in person. But Quinn was always somebody they fell in love with right from the jump, and was never, I don't care who tells you it, they're wrong, was never, way down the list and they settled for him. That's just not true. It's not the way it worked out. Anybody that was talking to anybody during that time knows that. But this situation could end up being a fifth or sixth or seventh choice when it comes to defensive coordinator, because Brian Flores maybe was a guy that they were very interested in. Jeff Ulbrich, I believe, was a guy they were very interested. Both of those guys are staying put. Ulbrich in Atlanta, and Flores, if he doesn't get a head coaching job, will be staying in Minnesota as the defensive coordinator, assuming he doesn't get a head coaching job. Now you're into, okay, we're back to the Quinn guys. Ulbrich was one of those, yes, but we're back to the Quinn guys where we're talking about Raheem Morris if he doesn't get a head coaching job, but Raheem's going to have options because of all of the defensive coordinator needs that are out there. There are just too many of them, and it's very possible that a team like Pittsburgh is waiting for Chris Shula, the defensive coordinator for the Rams. And all of a sudden, the Rams defensive coordinator job opens up. That's a big deal because Raheem Morris won a Super Bowl as a defensive coordinator with Sean McVay in Los Angeles. Green Bay, he's got a relationship with Matt LaFleur. Just because these guys have relationships with Dan Quinn and they like Dan Quinn, it doesn't mean professionally that would be the best move for them. It doesn't. That's why this Mike McDaniel conversation, by the way, have you seen that Mike McDaniel interviewing for the Buffalo head coaching job? It looks like that Chargers offensive coordinator job is contingent on him not getting a head coaching job. Interesting because apparently his wife is from L.A., Mike McDaniel's wife, and the thought of living in Southern California was very appealing, which, by the way, all these things are part of the decision-making process for all of these guys. Mike McDaniel's availability to be an OC, which we don't even know if that's going to happen because he's interviewing for the Bills head coaching opportunity now. He might get a job, who knows, as a head coach. But just because he may have been available as an OC, and you can see the process he's going through. He wasn't a Buffalo head coaching candidate because Sean McDermott didn't get fired until earlier this week. So sitting around and waiting for Mike McDaniel, if that was ever a desire for the team, for Quinn, for Peters, it wasn't going to be very easy. And you were going to risk losing the guy that the moment he came into your building, you thought was eventually going to be your offensive coordinator. Of course, it was supposed to play out differently. Kingsbury was supposed to get a head job after, a year or 2 years of unbelievable success. And he did have 1 year of unbelievable success. And I think most people in the league understand what he was up against this year and probably believe to a certain extent what I believe, which is he did a pretty good job considering who he had out on the field playing for him this year. But waiting for McDaniel, even if he eventually became an offensive coordinator candidate because he didn't get a head coaching job, you had to wait on the head coaching job possibilities, and those haven't been exhausted. You've still got, 5 openings at this point after Jesse Minter was named Baltimore's head coach, right? Is it still 5 that are open right now, Max?
I think so. It's moving so fast at this point, I can hardly keep track of it anymore.
You have Arizona, you have Buffalo, you have Pittsburgh, you have the Raiders. Who are we missing?
Scrolling through it now. I think that's it. it.
Cleveland.
Oh, yeah.
Cleveland. 5 openings.
And nobody wants to go there either.
5 out of the 10 currently are still open. So the whole, why didn't we just wait for Mike McDaniel? Well, because A, it was going to be a wait. B, even if he didn't get a head coaching job, he was going to have a lot of other opportunities. And just because he loves Dan Quinn and credits Dan Quinn for really being a significant presence in his life during a very difficult time, it doesn't mean that professionally Washington would have been the best spot. His wife is from Southern California. They got an opportunity to go work with Justin Herbert and a pretty damn good football team that's been in the playoffs a few years in a row. I think this opportunity working with Jaden Daniels is a really good one too, and I bet Mike McDaniel would say that. But there's a lot that goes into these decisions. But back to the defensive coordinator spot. I think they got their guy at OC. I do. I mean, the Mike McDaniel firing may have thrown a bit of a wrinkle into it, and maybe they hesitated and said, can we get Mike? We'd have to wait for him. He might get a head coaching job. He's going to have other options. I think they got their guy, though, as offensive coordinator. I do. I think this is the guy that they've been planning on moving to all along. Got him, again, in a different circumstance, but they got him. And they promoted him, and they're very, very comfortable with that. But as far as a defensive coordinator spot, they're in a bind right now. They're not going to get, more likely than not, one of those big name guys that I think might excite people. I don't know if that means much. I think Brian Flores would have meant much. I do. I think Brian Flores would have been the one that would have come in here and we could have all felt comfortable, even if they don't add 4 new starters defensively, 5, 6 new significant contributors. This guy can get the most out of what they have, and it won't be the worst defense in the league next year. I don't know about what anybody else can do. I don't know, that Jeff Ulbrich was going to get that out of, lesser talent. I don't know that Raheem will get that done. I don't know that Patrick Graham or Joe Cullen or Carl Scott or any of these guys. But they're lining up their board, and they've got, number 1 and number 2 maybe off their board, Flores and Ulbrich. So we're already down to maybe number 3. And number 3 might be Raheem, but Raheem, if he doesn't get a head coaching job, could end up in L.A., could end up in Green Bay, could end up in a number of spots that may be more attractive. Because let's be honest, coming to Washington with what Washington has defensively, talent-wise, can't be the best option for anybody out there looking for a defensive coordinator spot. So money talks. You want to pay somebody an obscene amount of money so much more. Raheem's getting head coaching money for the next few years. He's in a Kingsbury spot where Atlanta's going to be paying him for a couple of years, head coaching money. So maybe, he's got the opportunity to kind of pick and choose and not worry about, being, wooed by compensation. So you're not going to get him that way. He's already getting head coaching money. Now we're into Patrick Graham's and Joe Cullen's and Carl Scott's and Denard Wilson's. I have no idea what their board looks like for these guys, but there's no doubt that at this point, they are into the position that some said they got into with their head coach in January of 2024, which just was not true. But this will be true. They're not going to get one of their top choices for defensive coordinator. So it's going to come down to next year. Yeah, I mean, they may end up getting the best guy. Maybe Carl Scott's the best guy. Keim, really felt like there are a lot of people that believe he's got a chance to be the next really good defensive coordinator. But is Washington going to go the route of having two coordinators who have never done it before? And Quinn, potentially having to bring in some sort of offensive consultant, senior consultant, and defensive senior consultant to oversee two younger guys. Now, Carl Scott, as an example, is 40 years old. So he's not David Blau at 30 years old. It's going to be really interesting. And I really thought this time last week, and I think I said it on the show, that I'd be surprised if we're here in a week and we don't have a defensive coordinator. Now, I think the clear indication is we're going to have to wait for these, or most of these head coaching jobs to fill, and, the head coaches in those spots start looking at filling out their staffs. I mean, Raheem's probably in a good position. He's probably going to have some choices. And I think some of these other guys are going to have some choices. And you're going to end up with, the musical chair, the music stopping and a lot of chairs already being filled. And you're looking for a partner and it's probably down your list. I hope it doesn't work out that way, but I feel like it's heading in that direction because it's not an attractive spot for, someone with options because of the talent. Offensive coordinator is an attractive spot, but they had their guy there. But defensive coordinator, other than the fact that you get to work in an organization that by all accounts is viewed much differently than it's been viewed in a long time, and you're going to work, for a head coach that everybody likes and everybody respects. I mean, this defense needs a total makeover talent-wise. I mean, for somebody to kind of look out there and say, my best defensive player is coming off a serious injury, Dorrance Armstrong, and my second best defensive player is 37 years old, that's probably not super attractive. All right, when we come back, we'll start looking at the games this weekend, and I've got a what do you got? Something Wizards team president Michael Winger said about Denny Avdia. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. Wizards president Michael Winger held a press conference yesterday. Look, you guys got to do a better job of letting people know that the team president is going to speak. There's not a whole lot of, attentiveness to that team right now. I had no idea this was going on, and I'm assuming I'm not the only one, but whatever. We'll move on from that. I did see, because several of you sent me what he said about Denny Avdia, because I was a big Denny Avdia believer. I didn't like that they traded him. I thought they were trading away a player that was a future NBA All-Star at 22 years old. And he is having his true breakout season. Now, he was pretty good in Portland last year, but for those that don't know, remember, Denny Avdia was picked by the Wizards in that 2020 draft, which was the COVID draft. So there wasn't the same level of intense. I mean, they had played the bubble finals, which went into the fall when the Lakers won the title and beat Miami in the finals, right, Max? They beat the Heat.
Correct.
And Jimmy Butler in the finals. That was another one of those unbelievable Jimmy Butler playoff runs, even though it was in the bubble with a team that really shouldn't have been in the NBA finals. But we ended up having the draft in the late fall, like November of 2020. And that was the draft that Anthony Edwards was taken number 1 in. And then it was, a mixture of players. There were a lot of opportunities. I remember being a big advocate for Jalen Stick-Smith from Maryland. That was the Maryland team that probably would have made a deep, deep run into the tournament, but they didn't play the tournament because of COVID in the spring of 2020. I'm looking at the draft right now to see the other players. I didn't know much about Denny Avdia at all at that point. Yeah. I remember feeling like Anthony Edwards was a big risk because Anthony Edwards had talked about things like, I'm not really a basketball guy. I don't love basketball. There were really, alarming comments that had a lot of people worried about him. Turns out, pretty good player. Anyway, the Wizards drafted Denny Avdia 9th in that draft. And I always felt like a badass competitor. I mean, right from the jump, you could tell he feared nothing. He was big. He was long. He could handle the ball for his size. He could defend. He was scrappy, competitive. And the one thing I remember during some of those years, it's like, yeah, but he can't shoot. But if you watched him, you're like, he's eventually going to be an okay shooter because the stroke was never terrible. He did not shoot it well from behind the arc in his early years in Washington. He didn't shoot it great, overall field goal percentage. But that last year here was like, wow, that dude's a different guy. He jumped from 9 points a game to nearly 15 a game. He was averaging 7 rebounds a game, his highest assist total, his highest steal total, his shooting percentage from field goal shooting percentage jumped to 50.6. His 3-point shooting percentage jumped to a career high 37.4. He became a better free throw shooter, everything about it. And then they traded him. And so Michael Winger, I don't know who asked this question, but when you guys sent this to me, I was actually a little bit surprised that anybody went back to the Denny Avdia trade. But this is what he said when he was asked whether or not trading Denny Avdia was a mistake.
Robbins from The Athletic. I know hindsight is 2020. It's now been 18 months since the team traded Denny. Was that trade a mistake?
No, it was not a mistake. I'm very, very happy for Denny. We're all very happy for Denny. We saw Denny as a very high-level ascending player. I'm super happy for him, super happy for the Blazers. We've got a lot of friends there with the Blazers. But no, because we did it for the reasons we said then, which is to, in effect, take us back a couple of years so that we could reset the roster and everybody was sort of on the same age curve, and Denny's ahead of that.
Denny is 25 years old, just turned 25 years old. Look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that ultimately it wasn't the right thing. I just felt like you've got a super young player at 22 years old who appears to be ascending and appears to have all-star potential. You're trading him for essentially a lot of picks that turned into, Bub Carrington. And, there are other picks that are coming our way. It was Malcolm Brogdon and the 2024 pick from Portland, which turned into Bub Carrington. They've got a 2029 first-round pick, 2 second-round picks. So there's future value. I just don't know if I think that taking something that looks to be closing in on what you're looking for in the draft, an eventual, all-star or a group of all-star talented players, and resetting because he's 3 or 4 years older than the other guys. He knows what he's doing. I don't. But I don't know that when they made the trade, my guess is they didn't see this coming. If somebody said Denny Avdija is going to be averaging 26 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists, and he's going to be an all-star in 2 years, do you still want to trade him to the Blazers for Malcolm Brogdon and their 14th overall first-round pick and then some future picks? Now, it's also possible that Avdija wouldn't be what he is in Washington based, what he's doing in Portland, that he wouldn't be doing it on this particular team in Washington. Portland's having a better than anticipated season. They're a game over 500. They've got a team that Avdija is leading right now, but they've got guys like Jeremiah Grant and Drew Holiday and, some key players. The guy Shaedon Sharpe, who played at Kentucky and was drafted in the first round in 23, I think, is really coming into his own this year. So it's very possible with a much younger group, Avdija wouldn't be doing what he's doing. But next year, when I think people believe the tanking is over, describe it any way you want, and that they're actually going to try to win next year. And he had some interesting things to say about Trae Young during the press conference yesterday as well. But I don't know. I would have loved a player that I knew was an all-star. But my guess is, and he didn't really answer it in that question, they liked Denny. They wanted to reset it. I don't know that they thought he was going to end up being what he has played like this year. I don't know that they ever saw a 27-point-a-game scorer in Denny Avdija. That's my guess. I could be wrong. He said very high-level ascending player, but they did it to reset it. I don't know if very high-level ascending player, if they would have really told you in that moment, yeah, we're trading away a future all-star to reset the roster. I don't think they believed him to be that. Believed him to be a really good player and a good piece, but would have been 3 years older than everybody else. 3 years. I mean, we're talking about 19, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, and he was 22 when they made the trade. Man, I don't know. I would have taken the bird in hand if they felt like it was a bird in hand. And I don't know that they did. There were other things he said about Trae Young in particular. I thought one of the quotes, do you have the one where he talks about, Trae Young making everybody better? Do you have that one, or should I read that one?
I'm still combing through it. You should read it.
Winger was asked how the acquisition of Trae Young fits into the development of the younger players. And he said, quote, Trae Young has a very long track record of making players around him better, particularly on the offensive end. Yes, glad he made that distinction because it's not necessarily on the defensive end. But let's play a little bit more of what you have, because I know you've got some cuts from him. Because, look, we're not going to spend a lot of time on the Wizards for obvious reasons. But it is an interesting group they've put together. Like, I've paid a lot more attention since the Skins season ended to their games. And they've got some pieces. I don't think on their roster currently they have the player that's going to be the top 5-ish elite level first team NBA All-Star every year guy that can carry you and lead you to a championship. I don't know that they have that, but that player may be available in the upcoming draft if they end up with the top two selection. They have to end up with a top 2 or 3 selection in this upcoming draft. That really would put an incredible cap on what they've done for the last couple of years, and I think really potentially give them their best chance of having it pay off. Because an A.J. Debinsa from BYU or the kid from Kansas, or if you're a Cam Boozer guy, he would be number 3 on my list right now. But you still need, even though Keyshawn George really looks like he's potentially a future, all-star candidate. Alex Sarr, for sure, looks like a future all-star candidate. Trey Johnson, loved him coming out last year. We talked all about him before the draft. I'm so glad they made that selection. That dude can just flat out shoot it, and he can score. He is something else with his range. I mean, this is legitimate Lillard Curry-esque range. And I like Will Riley. Gotten a lot of him over the last few weeks. I think they found something in Will Riley out of Illinois, the player they picked last year in the draft. So they've got some very interesting pieces for those of you who are not paying attention. And I mean some pieces that could end up looking like let's just take, the most recent champion, Oklahoma City, and it looks like that kind of a supporting cast. They just have to find their SGA. And I don't think that's Trae Young. That's not Trae Young. Okay, it's not. But it could be the top 2 or 3 pick in the draft this year. Or it could be something else they do with all of their picks and some of their young talent via trade. But this was him talking about, it's time to find out who's going to be in D.C. long term. Do you have that one, Max?
Sorry, which one?
Number 1.
We're coming upon a time, mostly within the next 6 to 18 months, where we have to declare which of our youngest players can make material contributions to our eventual contention and which will make their most meaningful contributions somewhere else. Unfortunately, there are only so many roster spots and so many minutes on an NBA basketball team, and we need to know what a lot of these guys can do.
That was him on that. This was him on not hitting the gas pedal quite yet.
But we're not necessarily hitting the gas pedal. And so whatever we do with that cap space, it might evaporate in the next 2 weeks. We just don't know. But we'll do something creative with that cap space. It could be acquiring a player, it could be trading for a player, it could be re-signing some of our own players. We're working through all those scenarios right now.
Yeah, they have a lot of cap space coming up this summer. Look, next year cannot be we're losing as much as we can to get the best possible lottery odds. Next year will be the first year that we can really start to watch this team and say, have they made the progress? Are they making progress towards next year? It would be 35 to 40 wins and contention for the play-in, 7 through 10. Then the following year, it would be, have they made that jump to 40 to 45 games and definitely in the play-in and potentially looking at a 6 seed in the Eastern Conference playoffs? That would be obviously the 2028 season. 2029, by the time we get there in 2030, we'll know. We'll probably know at that point. I like what they've been doing. I'm totally supportive of what they've been doing. I've said this so many times over the years. That's the team in town. If they ever became a legitimate late May, June contender, it would really be a big deal in this town. We are a basketball town at its core, with more people involved in that sport than any other. Of course, the football team is number 1 by miles. I don't think that'll ever change. But if you had an NBA championship contender over a period of time, it'd be a massive deal. I'm rooting for it and hope it happens. Hope we start to see the beginnings of something like that next year. All right, there was a big trade involving the Nats ace Mackenzie Gore. Grant is going to jump on with us. Grant Paulson from 106.7 The Fan to give us his thoughts on that trade. That's next. Joe Theismann coming up at 11. Ben will jump on with us at 12, and Doug Kammerer will be on with us at 12:30 with storm predictions. We'll have our own. I've got a smell test on the show today as well. Jumping on with me right now is Grant Paulson from 106.7 The Fans, Grant and Danny show. We'll talk some Skins here in a moment, defensive coordinator search, but help me understand the Mackenzie Gore trade to the Rangers for 5 prospects. I thought that the rebuild started a few years ago when they traded Juan Soto and Mackenzie Gore became part of the future. What's going on? Where are we right now with the Nats?
Yes, so you were right that was when the rebuild began. And the timeline, and I thought the rebuild for a couple of years was going very well. The timeline was that as of this past season that just happened, going into that year, they were supposed to turn a corner. In fact, in spring training, I remember talking to you about this on the air. They said it's time to win. It's time to push our chips in. Well, the problem was, while everything had pretty much gone well in terms of what you acquired in the Soto deal, building up the system, having some young major league talent, they didn't spend any money to supplement it. They didn't bring in any big league talent. They fielded what was probably, if everything went well, mid-70s to upper 70s win roster. They needed to add in free agency and go spend and bring in reinforcements. That's what you do. You build the foundation. Think about the Wizards, what they're doing right now. But eventually you're going to have to go find your Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, right? You're going to have to bring in your stars to make this whole thing work. The Nats didn't do that part. Ownership didn't commit the funds to do that. The team ended up fizzling. Last year was a sum of all fears kind of season as it was. Injuries in the system to some of their top arms. Some things go off the rails. They end up blowing out Rizzo, blowing out Davey Martinez, and now they're resetting again. Now the question is, are they ever going to spend when it's time to? They say yes. Right. I'm kind of in seeing is believing mode at this point. Little miracle on 34th Street bit here for me with ownership. And I think eventually they sell. I just think it's not able to happen until after the work stoppage. But that's kind of the big question. But people will say, oh, the rebuild was a failure. I wouldn't say that. I think they rebuilt pretty well. When you get a foundation like they did with Gore and with Abrams and with Wood and some of the young talent supplemental, extra secondary role pieces like Jacob Young and Dalen Lyle, I think that's plenty of foundation in terms of the internal building blocks. The supplements didn't happen. And so now are they kind of resetting and I don't want to say rebuilding the rebuild, but they're going to do this again? Yeah, they absolutely are. And I think what happened yesterday was actually, frankly, necessary because here's why, Kev, real quick. The timeline has to match. So Michael Winger had a comment yesterday. He was asked about the Denny Yabdia trade, and I thought it was fitting. Yep. He basically said, we don't regret it because his timeline didn't match our timeline. And this is the problem with Mackenzie Gore, who's Boris advised. He's probably leaving in free agency in 2 years. They're not going to be good enough to win anything meaningful in the next 2 years. And everything they've done this offseason, in fact, says they're not pushing for a wild card spot this year. They're trying to just get stronger at the minor league level to eventually be better. So if that's the case, trade him as soon as possible for the most assets. I would think Abrams, they've got to talk about as well at some point, who's got 3 years left to benefit with him. He's not a Boris guy, so maybe you can re-sign him if you want to.
Yeah, I actually spent some time talking about the Avdia trade. I think the issue is I'd love to know what they really thought of Avdia when they traded him. Did they see a future all-star in him or not? And would that have changed their calculus, even though they wanted to they wanted the reset to match up with their 18 and 19-year-olds at the time? So maybe it's impossible to just look at this trade as its own entity, as a standalone, without all of the context of rebuild, et cetera, whether or not the learners will spend. But tell me, as a standalone trade, how the Nats did. Did they get enough back?
I think they did fine. And it's funny because the last name of the key player in the deal is Fien, F-I-E-N. And how he performs is going to determine whether or not this trade eventually is a net win or not.
Tell everybody who that is.
Yeah, so Gavin Fien was the 12th overall pick this past year, a top 15 selection. He's 18 years old in an A-ball, and he was the number 2 prospect in the Rangers system. If you like the bat, the Nats obviously do. The reports are that the Red Sox, when Taboni and some of the other staffers now in D.C. with him were there, they were all over him in the draft. So this is a guy they really like, clearly, Kev. If you like the bat, then you think he's got a chance to be a stud in the big leagues. This first thing I think that needs to be said, this is not a Soto deal. There was one of those. That's generational.
Sure.
The way I'm talking about this that works, I think, is in the Soto deal, you got really blue chip high end prospects. So think about it like Sharpie prospects, locked to be great. Pen prospects where this guy's going to be really good, and then pencil prospects where it could go either way, right? Everyone looks at prospects as all the same, like, oh, they're suspects, they're minor leaguers. Well, that's not really true. If you look at the history of the guys that are ranked in the top 10 or 20 in baseball, they end up being very good at a very high clip. And then as you get down the board, lesser thought of guys in the minor leagues generally don't. So in the Soto deal, you got a Sharpie player in James Wood that everybody knew was going to be an impact player in the big leagues. I don't know that anybody knew he'd be this good this quick. You got a Sharpie player in Mackenzie Gore, who was already in the big leagues, who's going to be a high-end, helpful starting pitcher. You got a Sharpie player in C.J. Abrams, who was already in the big leagues and who was going to help you in the infield right away. Like, that was that deal. It was an all-timer. And then you got some pen players, and Hassel is pretty safe to be a major leaguer. Susana's an elite pitching prospect. In this deal, I don't think they got any pen players. So that's where people are a little bit frustrated, is that you got what I'm calling 5 pencil players. You got 2 pretty good prospects who are safe bets to be major leaguers in Gavin Fein, and then the best arm in the deal, who actually needs Tommy John right now, is Alejandro Rosario, who's close to the big leagues. He was electric. I think he's one of the 5 to 7 best pitching prospects in baseball, maybe, if he's healthy. Jim Callis, of Pipeline, yesterday told me if he gets back to where he was in 24 when he last pitched in the minors up to Double-A, he said it's 3+ pitches with plus control, and he's a front of the rotation starter. Now, there's no guarantee after 2 years of missing baseball that he ever gets back to that. But the floor for him is that he'll be like an electric reliever, I would say. The ceiling is still that he's a member of the rotation. So if Fein turns into an everyday third baseman, second baseman, and if Rosario turns into a member of the rotation, then it's a win of a trade. You're looking for 2 solid pieces back out of 5. You got 3 other lottery tickets here who are down the board a little bit. We could talk about if you want to. But 5 for 1's an analytics thing. You're basically just taking bites at the apple. You could do what the Mets did, where in the Brewers deal with the day before, when a trade was made for Freddie Peralta, the Brewers said, we'll give you Freddie Peralta. We want 2 of your best prospects. And that's what they got back. Different deal, obviously. But they went with quality over quantity, essentially. 2 top 100 guys. The Nats are saying, give us 5 guys to flood the system with. They didn't get any top 100 prospects back. I think Fein will be one at the end of the year. That's going to be the knock here. So long-winded answer. I think they did okay. I would say fine. I'm not in love with the return, but I like the return.
What did they lose really in Gore? Because there was a moment there where people thought this guy is an ace. I mean, he's a guy that leads your rotation. Was he that?
He is not an ace. An ace, I think, is a term that gets overused for anyone who's the number 1 pitcher on a team. How many aces are there in baseball, Kev? I mean,
was he a number 1 pitcher on a good team?
He has the upside of being that. He has not been for an entire year here. Certainly has in stretches. I'm a big Mackenzie Gore guy. I think he's a number 2 starter on a championship level team, which is a big time asset, by the way. I mean, this is a deal. If I'm the Rangers, I'm thrilled to have made to add him to my rotation. This is a championship piece. I think he's going to get huge money in 2 years in free agency. It's a lefty who sits 96, 97 with plus secondaries, who's an all-star. I mean, these guys aren't really available, and you're getting him on the cheap for 2 years before he hits the market. So if I was the Orioles, if I was the Brewers, smaller mid-market teams, this is 1,000% the type of guy I would have brought in. I'm a big, big, big believer in Gore, and I think his best is still yet to come. I think it's really hard when you're the best player. Think James Wood. Like, people are like, oh, he was so terrible in the second half. Look at all the strikeouts. Dude, you're the only really good player on the team and you're 22. Like, that's hard to do for 6 months every single day. And Gore dealt with that as a member of this rotation. So I think being in a championship program with talent around him, you're going to see a lot more and better consistency out of him. But look at opening day last year. 7 innings, 1 hit, 13 strikeouts against the World Series caliber lineup. There's 10 or 12 guys in baseball who could have had that outing. So the stuff is legit. He was a number 3 pick for a reason. But the point is, what did they lose? They lost a great pass rusher when they're 4-13. You know what I mean? They lost a piece that is valuable and legit. But you have him for 2 more years when you're probably going to average, if things go well, 68 to 72 wins. Yeah. You got to get pieces back that can help you when you're good again.
What's the best case on they'll be good and have a chance to compete for a wild card? What year is that?
Based on how this offseason has gone, I would say 2 years, so 2 seasons. But that would mean that a lot of the prospects that are closer to the big leagues click, and they spend next offseason, that they decide, okay, we feel like let's just say this year at the big league level, Dylan Cruz has a significant bounce back, really impressive year. James Wood is an MVP candidate. A couple other things go really well, like Cade Cavalli turns into a quality mid-rotation starter.
Right.
And if all that happens, see the Caps last year with McMichael and Protis and some of these guys developing. If you get that, and at the minor league level with some of the high-end, there's not a lot left in terms of the high system. Like most of those guys have graduated. See Brady House, who's super important this year, another guy that has to break out. If some of that happens, then you go, okay, let's supplement. Let's go get a bat who can hit 30 home runs and put him in, at first base. Let's go get a starting pitcher who can give us 200 innings in a sub-4 ERA. And now all of a sudden you could be, I don't know if there's a whole lot of value in this, but you could be the Reds of last year who, make the playoffs or are relevant at the end of September. I think they're thinking longer term and more like the Wizards though, Kev, where it's like being mediocre is not that interesting. Like winning 86 games and becoming, fodder for the Dodgers in the division series is not the goal. We're trying to build a monster here, and that might take longer, frankly.
All right. Who do you want now as the defensive coordinator? Since Ulbrich is off the board, Flores appears to be off the board. Where do you think this is headed?
Yeah, since all the guys I wanted are off the board. Raheem Morris would probably be next on my list as my guy. I don't even know if he's realistic because I still think there's a good chance he gets a head coaching job. Don't you have the same problem with Raheem, Kev, that you've had with these other guys? Aren't there better DC jobs he would want?
Definitely. I mean, Chris Shula gets the Pittsburgh job. He goes back and, where he's won a Super Bowl. I mean, Matt LaFleur's a big spot for him to replace Hafley. I mean, this is not an attractive defensive coordinator opening with the talent they have. It's not.
This is what I think needs to be acknowledged. So this Al Harris thing is super interesting to me, which is, look, I can talk myself into, and I would actually be intrigued by Al Harris. But we have to at least acknowledge the plan was to not do this. They did not want to do this. They wanted, if they're going to do the black on offense, to do the opposite on defense, so that Dan Quinn doesn't have to kind of play babysitter with 2 really young staff and first-time guys.
Right.
So what's happening is they're going down the list of babysitters in the movie scene, and they're crossing names off the list and Dennis the Menace. And so now they're expanding the search to, well, maybe we can get a first-time guy and Dan can call plays. But it's not going very well. I don't think anything they do will bother me, because I think it can work out because Quinn's in the building and he's sharp, and we saw when he took over play calling last year that he did a good job. But I guess realistically, let's say Raheem Morris has a better option. Of the names that are out there, I would say Gannon. If you're asking me for like a sleeper, I still think they could go with Patrick Graham, honestly. But I would swing bigger and go like Denard Wilson or somebody who's a little bit younger and up and coming, maybe at this point, if you can't get Gannon or Morris. But my prediction is Patrick Graham.
All right, last one, multiple choice. Kirk Cousins, A, stays in competes for the starting job with Kevin Stefanski as a familiar head coach for him. B, he ends up starting or going somewhere else, has a chance to start next year. Or C, we've seen the last of Kirk. He decides to hang it up and become the next big thing on TV because he's good at that.
I thought C for the last couple of months, and I now think B. Yeah. I think B.
Is B Minnesota?
Minnesota's absolutely an option. I don't think they're as enamored with J.J. McCarthy as maybe some might think. But look out for Miami. And this is just a guess, but by them hiring Hafley, I don't know what they do with Tua or how that works out money-wise, but Hafley is close with Sean Mannion, who was a coach under LaFleur, quarterback's coach. Yeah. Mannion was Kirk's backup and a good friend of his in Minnesota. Right. And if Mannion became the OC in Miami, I would be very surprised if they need a quarterback, if they're moving on from Tua, if they don't at least reach out to touch base with Kirk. So that's kind of a connecting of the dots there. But right now I'm saying B. I thought he was going to retire, and I just think there's a lot of teams that probably want quarterbacks, and he's got a chance to compete.
All right, great job. Good to catch up. 2 to 6:30 today. Grant and Danny on 106.7 The Fan. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, Kev. Be good, brother.
Grant Paulson, everybody. Joe Theismann next. Two football games Sunday, championship games. Our championship and Super Bowl winning quarterback is with me right now, Joe Theismann. Are you in town? Are you in Memphis? Where are you?
I'm in town.
You are. So are you going to try to get out so
Fixing to
you
get
can
out-
be
fixing
playing
to get
golf
out
this
of
weekend
town.
somewhere? Or are you going to live through the weather?
No, I'm not going to live through the weather. I'm going to go someplace where it's warm.
Yeah, of course you
for
are.
at least a couple days. Why not? I know you're going to be here though.
I will be here. I will, and
Yeah.
and enjoying it. I like these big storms. What's the worst weather game you ever played in?
Well, it's an interesting question, Kev, because there's two games that come to mind. First of all, from a wet standpoint, we played Tampa. I guess it was, I don't know, maybe 83.
It was the
like
strike
that,
year.
82.
It was 82, week 2.
It was 80. I mean, we played in Tampa, and I remember watching. They did the, Hog Day afternoon or something like it, and they showed that season, and I remember the water coming down the stairs.
Yeah.
In the stadium, just cascading like a waterfall. It was so unbelievably bad. I mean, it was absolutely terrible. And so that was one of them. And the other one, we played in Buffalo, end of the season one year, and it was like -5 degrees. and it was like I don't know, 5,000 people in the stands. But
Right.
you know, from one extreme, from wet to cold, those were the most miserable I played in.
You know, but you playing at Notre Dame, you were used to the cold weather. By the way, the Tampa game was the last game before the strike. And then 2 months later came back. Obviously, the rest is history on the way to a Super Bowl season. And I do remember, and I just pulled up the box score, Joe. You were pretty good. You were 12 of 20 for 112 yards, 1 touchdown, but Rigo got 34 carries for 136 yards. So he was a pretty good mutter. I'm sorry?
That's what we do.
Yeah. Do you know who the opposing quarterback was that day?
I do not.
Doug Williams.
I was just going to say, I thought I was going to guess Doug, but
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
But you were used to cold weather games. That never bothered you, did it?
No, there's a difference between cold weather, Kevin, and -5 degrees. That is insanity. That's exactly what that is. That is not a cold weather game. I just, honest to goodness, I remember Ben Dreif was the referee in Buffalo, and he got confused. Something had happened, and he placed the ball like 15 yards where it shouldn't have been. So I'm having this conversation. Ben, we're on that yard line, not this yard line. Okay. He said, Joe, it's so cold, I can't think. I'm thinking, I can relate to that. My goodness. I mean, and you know, having played in a game like that just gives me more appreciation and continued appreciation for the Rams-Chicago game this past weekend. The conditions that they played in. I mean, if people want to get a feel for it, it's going to be like, 8, 9, 10 degrees. I don't suggest this, but in your mind, if you wanted to walk outside and try and grab a football and spend about 3 hours out there throwing it around and throw a cape on just to try and stay warm, give you an idea what they went through.
Were you impressed with Caleb Williams this year?
Yes. What a difference a year makes. I really was. His decision-making, his athleticism was pretty similar to what it was a year ago, but he did a much better job protecting the football. Much better job protecting the football than he did, than he did a year ago. And it's coaching, it's system, and it's made a world of difference for him.
All right. Tell me what you thought of David Blau being elevated to the offensive coordinator position at 30 years old.
I think I don't have a problem with, his age at all. I think he'll bring a different perspective. He worked with Cliff, but I think he has his own ideas of what he wants to do as far as the offense goes. I think Jaden has a relationship with him. I think that's good that they'll be able to communicate, because you really have to, as a quarterback, you and your coordinator have to have a single mind. When he calls a play, it's not what it is, it's why did he call it. And that's something that these two will be able to work together with. I didn't have a problem at all with the hire. I don't look at somebody's age. I think, Sean Payton, Kyle Shanahan, these guys were all very young when they really started to become head coaches as well as coordinators. And, you look at the job that they have done in time. So from my perspective, I think it's good. I think it brings consistency to that side of the ball.
Were you surprised that Quinn moved on from Kingsbury?
Yes, I was to a degree, only because I don't know how, if you're basing it, it's been let's first of all preface it this way. All these 10 firings, some of them have just been bizarre. You'll agree, I'm sure. It's like, you can't really figure out why, but They were done. I think in Cliff's case, it's hard to hold somebody accountable for our offense when you don't have people to play football with.
Right.
Terry was gone for a while. Your line, you're not getting the support. You're losing people on the defensive side. You're unfortunately suffering the missed kick situations. So many different things entered into this particular season for us to be able to try and win football games, to be successful. Your quarterback's in, your quarterback's out, your quarterback's in. Let's go to somebody else. I got a big kick out of Josh Johnson's commercial where I didn't realize he played for 14 different football teams.
Yeah.
Us being the latest, and who knows where he's going to be next year. But everybody keeps going. But I was a little surprised. But then again, as I looked at the firings around the league, both coordinators and head coaches, I reconciled myself to the fact that I shouldn't be surprised at all what's going on.
I want to get to that in a moment, but I'm glad you said what you said because, I've been here, battling with some who don't, it's like teams and players in the mix, in the battle, they don't use injuries as an excuse. And I totally understand that. But as an observer, you have to be able to observe that this team basically didn't play with any of its best players for the significant majority of the season. I don't know how you evaluate a season like that. And yet, you've got, people that want to hold Quinn and Peters and, Kingsbury and everybody else accountable for playing practice squad players for many of those games. That's kind of hard to, I know the 49ers had a really good season with a lot of injuries, but that's the exception to the rule.
Yeah, but some of the injuries, they were exceptions, but you had people to be able to make up the difference. We didn't.
Exactly.
We didn't have people to plug in and go. And I'm in your camp on this. Listen, guys become starters in the National Football League because they're better than the other guys. Okay, let's be flat honest with it. When you're playing a team with a lot of guys that are backups or practice squad guys or guys that have signed just a week earlier, they're not going to be at the same level of the guys you're trying, that are the ones. When ones and twos play, ones normally dominate and win. You'll find a good one here and there, but we had so many different holes to try and plug through the course of the year. The one thing I was very proud of, Kevin, was the way this football team fought, and that's a credit to Dan Quinn. They fought. I mean, they fought right to the last possible snap of the season, which was a miserable season for us as fans, for the players. There's nothing worse than losing. There's nothing worse than going on a 7, 8, 9 game losing streak. I went through a 6-10 season, and believe me, it's no fun to go to work, but you have to. You have to find something to get you motivated to get out there to be the best you can be. Sundays aren't enough. It's got to be something that happens during the week. And this is where I thought Dan did an excellent job as the head coach of this football team. And I think Dan Campbell, I think Dan Quinn, both need to go back and be head coaches. Being the coordinators takes time.
Right.
And I think, I think though you look at the years both of them had a year ago. And then all of a sudden they took over different roles, which I'm sure they had reasons why they wanted to do it. Obviously our defense wasn't playing well and Dan's offense didn't seem like it was performing well. So each of them decided what they were going to do. They were going to take control. It's my job. It's my football team. I'm in charge. I got to try and fix this. But I just think the role of the head coach is so vast, and there's so many different elements that a lot of people don't really understand what goes into it, that it's difficult to be able to deal with one side of the ball when you're not really comfortable with the other side either.
Every time I have you on, you'll say something and it'll make me think of something else. And you just said something in that answer. And I want to emphasize it because you said it, and you said I suffered through a 6-10 season. It was Joe Theismann's only season in the NFL on a team with a losing record, the only one. And it was the year after the 79 heartbreak in Dallas season finale. Riggins took the year off. It ultimately, you and I have talked about this many times. That was Jack Party's final year. You guys went 6-10. If the Dallas game the year before goes differently, we probably don't get Joe Gibbs.
You're right. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And if the Ravens game goes, that's all it is. And which really brings into light the tremendous accomplishment that Mike Tomlin performed in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
To what, 18 years, 18 seasons without a losing record. Who's going to step into those shoes when you think of Chuck Noll and Bill Cowher and Mike Tomlin? I mean, you're talking darn near 50 years of three coaches. Cleveland goes through that in a week.
Well, we kind of went through that for a little while
too.
Yeah,
and we did for a while as
I
well.
know.
But no, it was, it's this whole situation. This is a very unusual year in football.
It sounds like
I was-
you're upset about some of these firings. Which is the one that has you most upset?
Sean McDermott.
Yeah. Why?
And I'm listening to these. I'm watching these talking heads on TV attack Josh Allen. We've all had bad games. If you're a quarterback, you have had a bad game. Unfortunately, mine happened in Super Bowl 18. One of the worst games I think I've ever played. But that's a fact. Josh Allen protected the ball all year. Terrific. No interceptions, no this, no that, no fumbles. All of a sudden, he has a game where he can't seem to put his shoes on the right foot. But they would not have been there had it not been for Josh Allen.
They wouldn't have been close in that game if it hadn't been for Josh Allen.
That's my point. But I sit here and I listen to people. Well, Josh is this, Josh is that, and at the end, I felt so bad for him because I've actually sat in that chair. I've sat in front of those cameras, and I've had to say the same thing. This is on me. Because so many people rely on that position. That's why it's so difficult to find one. And when you find one that can play well, the big onus belongs to the organization to surround that position with people that can play.
Yeah.
I think Buffalo's they've got some holes. Defensively, they weren't that good. Running the ball, terrific. Great support. Is the play calling, does it skew one way or the other? Well, heck, I got Josh Allen. Why not? I'll skew it to throwing the ball. I thought a couple of years ago he was making mistakes in the red zone. He'd throw an interception in the end zone that I thought just, that doesn't make sense. I don't know what he's looking at. I felt like the last year or so he's done a terrific job protecting the ball as far as throwing it goes. And, nobody's talking about the Cook fumbling. I think he led the league in fumbles this year, right?
Yeah. And that would have made they were going in for a 2-score lead.
Going in. Absolutely. They were going in. That was like the 10, 11-yard line, something like that. So, not that you want to single out an individual. And like I said, that's why I feel so strongly about, Josh can hold his head high. He did everything he could, and he just had one of those days that you hope you never have, but you wind up having it.
I'm so with you on that, and I actually don't think he had a terrible day. He made so many great throws and made so many great plays, and the 4 turnovers. The one at the end of the half was head scratching. The fumble. I actually think he'll regret the miss to Knox at the end of regulation more than anything else because that was a walk-off touchdown if he hits it.
He threw it high.
Yeah,
he missed high.
Yep.
And it wasn't because he was pressured. And then then turn around, take a look at Caleb with the Hail. Basically, you can call it a Hail Mary.
Yeah,
where he's running around all over the place, and he launches one in the air. And how in heaven's name, if you're a Ram defender, do you let a guy get that open in the end zone when your quarterback's 40 yards up the field the other way? You can't track the ball. And an FYI in this game, the Rams secondary has to tackle better, or they're not going to beat Seattle. It's going to be close anyway, but they got no chance.
Yeah, let's get to those games. Joe Theismann, of course, is with us. So I actually want to start with the first one, and I want to ask you, how Jarrett Stidham, with Sean Payton's help, et cetera, how that football team goes into that game Sunday believing in Jarrett Stidham. What's been happening during the course of the week in the buildup that will give them their best chance with a guy playing for the first time this year?
He's been sharp in and out of the huddle. He's communicated the plays very clearly, very succinctly. And, Sean Payton, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Matt LaFleur, all these guys, their verbiage and their offenses are very wordy.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a very short period of time with the length of these plays, and just to hear them called and to understand what needs to be done. You get the communication from the coach, then you have to regurgitate it to the guys. Then the coach gets cut off at 15 seconds, and now you've got 15 seconds basically to evaluate and make decisions. I was glad I played in an era when I didn't have somebody in my ear. But I think in Jarrett's case, it's like, look, get the ball out of your hands. make good decisions. What are you going to do against this defense? What are you going to do in this situation? Understand situational football. You got a heck of a defense. You don't have to do it all. I don't expect you to do it all. Probably going to support him with the run, but I think what he's going to do, I wouldn't be surprised if he comes right out first with a play action pass. People think, well, they're going to protect the quarterback. They'll run the ball. I don't think so. I think, to me, come out, a little play action, get the ball out of your hands, get yourself your first completion, sort of take a breath, go, okay, now we're into it. Now you will work yourself into your offense. And it's basically like Sheehan's going to sit in that meeting and say, guys, look, special teams, we got, Jared can get it done, but he's not going to be able to do it alone. Everybody's got to step up. This is the championship game. This is what you play for. This is the opportunity that you're looking for. You put this uniform on to be here. What I used to love about preparing for a Super Bowl is there were only 2 of us left. It's like when I played in the golf tournament when I was playing well. I was part of the last foursome to play in a tournament out at the American Century in Lake Tahoe. What was so neat about it is when you got to the range to hit balls, everybody else had left because they had to go play. You're like the last man standing. That's cool. That is so cool to know that you look around and there's only 4 teams, and we're one of those 4. And I think in Jared's case, he'll be able to play. If bad things happen to him early, it's going to be like a snowball. The big thing is it's not his physical skills. You can't have his head go bad. That's all.
43 years ago, by the way, almost to the day, was the first time you were one of those final 4. And still to this day, as we've talked about many times over the years, the most electric environment I have ever been in as a sports fan was that day at RFK against the Cowboys. As you've said many times, what followed it was anticlimactic to that day, right?
I agree. Because people have asked me, I've talked to you and I've talked this ad nauseum. The game that I remember the most, the Super Bowl. I remember more about the one I lost than the one I won. I mean, we were just on a high. We were just a bunch of kids. We were a bunch of guys we'd never experienced it.
Yeah.
You had the Wrecking Crew, you had the Hogs, you had John, being John. It was a circus. It really was. I felt like I was a ringmaster of a circus, not the quarterback of a football team. And that's I define that group of guys in a very simple way: characters with character.
Yeah.
Every one of those guys, if the game fell on their shoulders to make a play, they wanted that. Nobody shied away from making the play, being that person that has to make the play, being called upon to have to make that play. And that's exactly this. I guarantee you that's part of the conversation Sean's going to have with the guys out there in Denver.
43 years, Joe.
This isn't about
43 years ago. What happened to 43 years? All right. I don't want to keep you for so long. Just give me your thoughts on how Denver, New England plays out, and then how Seattle Rams plays out.
I think Denver. I don't think Denver wins this game. I think Sean's going to have to be limited to a degree. Bo did a lot with his legs, getting out of the pocket, somewhat similar to what Caleb we've seen him do. And that's where you see the big plays. That's where you see the conversions of third downs, his ability to run and pick up. I don't know if Jared is going to be that kind of a quarterback. I think it's going to have to be a little bit more of a stable kind of an offense, not one that goes on the fly a little bit. And I think that'll be a problem. Certainly they've had enough film to look at it. You're talking about Mike Vrabel, one of the great defensive players in the game of football's history. Okay, now all of a sudden, he knows what he's going to want his guys to do. And they're pretty stout up front, and his linebackers are really good, and the secondary is really good. So I think they're going to present a challenge for him out there. Even though this is the first time Drake May has gone on the road in a playoff, obviously did go last year, but the noise out there will be a factor. How will New England communicate? Will he make mistakes? He has not been very proficient through these games. So he's going to have to protect the football. He's going to have to play well. As far as the Rams go, it's all about tackling. Seattle is a tough place to play. Denver, both these places that guys are traveling to are not easy places to communicate in.
Yeah.
So your offensive line is going to have to listen hard. Puka's going to have to play well. I think this is a game where Cooper Kupp basically steps up. for Seattle because, he's playing the Rams. They released him, and it wasn't bad blood. It's just that he wasn't there anymore. I think plays will be designed to have him be a guy who can make a play. He gets to talk to him about the Ram culture. He gets to talk to the guys. And Seattle's got a ton of speed, terrific running back. I'm not 100% sure. The game, to me, quarterbacks sort of can offset one another with the people they have around them, running backs, wide receivers, line. I think the difference in this game is it's going to be, and I say it emphatically, it's going to be whether the Rams secondary can tackle.
Yeah,
that's it. Can you not knock them to the ground, not try and body block them, but wrap your arms around them and put them on the ground. That to me is where the game will be won or lost. I'm thinking Rams, but then again, and Sam Darnold has to play like he's been playing. Smart football, get the ball out of your hands. I think the Rams have to move him, get him uncomfortable. If he gets uncomfortable early, there's no telling what can happen. So, I'm still in a little bit of a coin toss with this, but probably would lean. I know these teams played really close games, but I would probably lean towards the Rams because if you study some of the film in these games, crazy things happen for Seattle to be in them. So
yeah, no doubt.
I'd probably lean Rams.
Well, the first game, Darnold threw 4 picks, and yet they had a field goal to win it. The second game, the Rams have a 16-point lead, 8 minutes to go in the game, and Seattle scores and converts on two-point conversions, one of which was the wildest play we've seen in years. So it took a hell of a lot, that's for sure.
And Rashid's something else.
You
got a dynamic special teams. I think could play a big part in this one as well.
Thanks for doing this as always. Hope you're well. Get to somewhere warm, and we'll talk maybe before the Super Bowl.
Everybody out there, stay safe. Don't try and be a hero. If you're going to shovel snow, please be careful. Do it in little bites. Don't try and think you can go out there. I don't care how old you are, how young you think you are. Please be safe. Please be careful, and take care. Talk to you soon, Kevin.
And think of you while you're in 78-degree sunny weather, deciding between an 8-iron or a 9-iron. I'll talk to you soon. Oh, you're heading to Palm Springs. Good for you. Enjoy that. Right. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Take care, bud. Bye.
Joe Theismann, everybody. Smell test coming up next. All right. First of all, our poll of the day driven by Waldorf Honda at the Waldorf Honda. It all starts with a click, waldorfhonda.com. It's up on our X page at Team 980. Which Super Bowl do you want to see? Do you think you'll see? Rams Patriots, Rams Broncos, Seahawks Patriots, or Seahawks Broncos? Interestingly, we would see 3 rematches of previous Super Bowls and 1 new one. We've never seen Rams Broncos, but we've seen Rams Patriots, Seahawks Patriots, and Seahawks Broncos. Seen all of those. All right, time for the smell test. Last week, good bounce back after that horrific wild card round weekend, which included some college plays. 3-1 last weekend to get to 120, 71, and 13 on the year. So 49 units above 500. It's at basically 62.9%, 63% rounding up for this season. So there are some sides here that are public and sharp money. We'll start with the first game. The public's on New England, big time. That line has bounced around a little bit, but there's probably a little bit more sharp money on Denver than there is New England. So give me the Broncos plus the 4.5. That's smell test pick number 1. We're going to preview these games and actually pick them with final scores. Max and I will do that next hour. But yeah, Denver's the play. A lot of public bettors on New England not believing that Jarrett Stidham can do it. And I'm not sure I believe he can do it either. But they're at home. The weather is going to be interesting in that game. Earlier in the week, it looked like 40s and sunny. Now it looks like mid-20s with a chance of snow showers during the game for the AFC Championship game. Now, it may be just a brief snow shower and then the sun comes out, but it's going to be cold. And maybe even a little bit windy in the Mile High City for that one. So Denver plus 4.5 going against the public there. And then the Rams-Seahawks game, this is always a tell. I've mentioned this before, but when you see all of the public money or a major amount of public money on one side on a key number, this being the number of 3, but the line sitting there 2.5, and it's really not moved. They're just saying, the sports books, come on, man. We want all of your Seattle minus 2.5 money. We are not scared. We're not moving that number to 3 to incent more Rams action. You've got sharp money on the Rams as well. Give me the Rams plus the 2.5. I would take a plus 3 if it was out there anywhere. I'll buy the 0.5 point and I'll play it at plus 3 myself. But I can't do that right now because there are no 3s. Out there. Rams plus 2.5, Denver plus the 4.5 are the 2 smell test plays. There's really no lean one way or the other on the totals. The only thing I would say is if you forced me to bet a total in either game, I'd go low. I'd go under on Seattle Rams. That's not an official play, but that one, the number, remember, it was 38-37 the last time they played. The number's at 46.5. There's definitely more overaction, but it's not overwhelming overaction on that one. So there you go. 2 plays. Denver plus the 4.5. The Rams plus 2.5. The 2 underdogs in both championship games. All right. When we come back, Denton will jump on with us. We'll go back to Monday night's national championship game and then look ahead to the college football season. And we'll get Denton's thoughts on both championship games as well. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
Oh, it's been a while, everybody. How are we doing? Happy Friday. The Nats, they made headlines yesterday, trading Mackenzie Gore to the Rangers in exchange for 5 minor league prospects, including infielder Gavin Fine, outfielder Abimelec Ortiz, right-handed pitcher Alejandro Rosario, infielder Devin Fitzgerald, and outfielder Yeremy Cabrera. The Ravens, they have also officially announced their hiring of Chargers defensive coordinator Jesse Minter to a 5-year deal, Plus, according to Tom Pelissero, the Cowboys are hiring Eagles defensive backs coach Christian Parker as their new defensive coordinator. The Chiefs have announced that Matt Nagy will not be returning to Kansas City following the hiring of Eric Bieniemy. Nagy has interviewed for multiple head coaching jobs this cycle. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1. You can catch programs like Take Command throughout all of this offseason. Don't forget to hit the like button whenever you do decide to join us and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
Pick up your book bags. Grab your notebooks. It's time to go on campus with Denton.
Hey, give me my theme music.
Denton is with us. We're going to talk some college football, but what did you just tell me during the break, Max, that Schefter just reported?
Yeah, this is a real Adam Schefter tweet. I am not being sentelled or anything like that. This is verified. ESPN sources, former Colts quarterback and current St. Michael Catholic High School coach Phil Rivers is interviewing today for the Buffalo Bills head coaching job.
Oh, my God.
I'd love it.
That would
That'd
be wild.
So sick. It'd be so fun giving him Josh Allen. And apparently Josh Allen has a very heavy say in who's going to be joining the Bills coaching staff.
Well, then don't you think it's going to be Davis Webb or Brian Dable?
You would think, but man, it would be so awesome if it was Phil Rivers, wouldn't it?
Well, I mean, what would be really crazy is what if Josh Allen got hurt and he became the first player coach in NFL history?
Suit him up, put the pads on, baby.
That's nuts. And Dallas, I heard you during your update, Dallas has named their new defensive coordinator. It's Christian Parker, not a name that we've heard recently, but he has spent the last 2 years as the Eagles passing game coordinator and secondary coach. And, of course, he's been on Vic Fangio's staff. Not a bad staff to pull an up-and-coming defensive coordinator, Christian Parker, the new defensive coordinator in Dallas. All right, Denton is with us. That would be pretty wild. I mean, Mike McDaniel just interviewed or is going to interview with Buffalo. You know, Joe said this, and I'm curious, Denton, because you and I haven't talked really since Monday night, just texting back and forth during the game. But Joe said that the coaching firing that bothered him the most was Sean McDermott. I think that's the one that bothers me the most too. In part because of the way Terry Pagula, the owner, kind of handled it. You know, he certainly did not handle the communication part of it the other day. But is there a head coaching firing that bothered you that you thought was wrong more than any other?
I mean, the McDermott one, yes. I think that's more so for me because of how he handled it. Like, we had heard these rumblings for, it feels like 2 years now, that maybe his seat was a little bit warm because they had high expectations, but then he just completely sounded like a buffoon at the press conference. I was a little surprised. Maybe I shouldn't have been. This is just the naivety in me. But Mike McDaniel getting fired after they said they wanted to keep him, because they could have fired him at the midpoint of the season, and they didn't. So I don't know why they let him go or let him stay for the entirety of the year. Saw that they got better, and it was really more of a Tua problem than a Mike McDaniel problem, and then still decided to move on. That was just head scratching. And then naturally today, the owner of the Dolphins was doing a press conference where he seemingly forgot the name of the general manager. So clearly two very well-run organizations.
I didn't see that. Wow. All right. Denton Day, of course, former producer of this show, now is doing a Westwood One show late at night with Linnell Willingham. And, of course, Denton does a lot for SiriusXM's college football channels. And he's the host of the Commanders pre- and post-game shows on the Team 980 and 106.7 The Fan. So let's go back to Monday night. Overall, did you love the game, or did you give me your reaction to, you know, what I thought was a great championship game?
It was awesome. I mean, it was a lot of fun. It was two teams that were on the same playing field, which is what we've always wanted in the championship game, because Lord knows we've seen games where one team is just super overmatched. It felt like both of these teams deserved to be there. And it was fun into the fourth quarter, which is something we haven't gotten a ton of in the championship games. I loved it. I thought it was really awesome. There were plays to be made, and, you know, one side made more than the other, but the Mendoza run I thought was epic. It's going to go down. It's not like one of the greatest plays in college football history, but it's going to be one of the greatest plays in the history of a program with Indiana. So I loved it. I thought it was a whole lot of fun. It was worth the wait. I still wish it was played a little bit earlier than it was, but I enjoyed it.
I mean, the TV numbers for this game, unbelievable for a national championship game. Over 30 million watched Monday Night Football. If you didn't know, you know now. I mean, the ratings from the playoffs over the weekend, it is so far and away the NFL and college football ahead of everything else that we consume as sports fans. It's not even worth talking about anymore in terms of what everybody cares about the most. By the way, I just saw this story. I don't know if you saw it. College football playoff to remain at 12 teams next season. Heather Dinich is reporting that. I'm actually happy about that. Are you?
I am. I think it'd be foolish to just start jumping every 2 years to a new format. You know, allow this one to play out. That's why I like the 4-team, right? Like we had about a decade of the 4-team playoffs. So we got to see, hey, we really like this element of it. We can change this element of it, but we got a good sample size to see that thing play out. I think it would have been really foolish to immediately after just 2 seasons be like, you know what? We need more teams, especially because I don't think that we necessarily need more teams. It will open the avenue for some, potentially interesting discussions and decisions that are going to need to be made this time. Well, I guess in December of this year with the Notre Dame situation, but I think 12 is still the number for what it should be.
Yeah, my only desire, and it's not going to happen because of the bowl tie-ins, is I'd love to see both the first round and the quarterfinal round be at home sites of the higher seeded teams. I think that asking, fan bases to travel, up to 3 times to bowl games is a big ask. And that's what you get with those final 2 teams is those fan bases went to 3 different sites to watch their team.
And Indiana traveled really well to all of them, but none of them were close to them. I mean, they went to the West Coast, they went down south, they went to they were all over the country too. Yeah. And, we are very fortunate, and this is something I don't think is considered a ton, Kevin, but we are very fortunate because we have 3 airports within a 40-mile radius. And not to say that they're all super cheap, but it's pretty easy to fly somewhere in the country with these airports. It's not that easy to do that in Bloomington. You got to drive a couple hours to a nice, good airport and then hope that airport has a good flight to that particular city. Is kind of a bit of a hop, jump, and a skip to get to some of these places. And there's a lot of teams in the country and fan bases in the country that have to deal with that I don't think is oftentimes taken into consideration.
So I want to tell you something about the game on Monday night that Scott told me. Scott Van Pelt told me yesterday. He said, because I said on the show, and he and I were talking, and I said, I think one of the biggest plays of the game was actually a mistake. Malachi Toney fielding that punt at the 2-yard line right before Miami went 3 and out and had the punt blocked. They had a lot of momentum, but the field position game was being won by Indiana, and I thought it was a big mistake that he fielded the punt at the 2-yard line. He told me that Miami had a punt return setup that almost, if he got to where the point was he needed to get to, it would have scored. I've not seen the all-22 on that, but that the Miami coaches and players were insistent that was the setup, and they had it set up beautifully if he had just gotten to where he needed to get to. But Indiana made a great play in covering the punt. Did you feel that way about him fielding the punt there, which led to the block punt 3 plays later?
Yes, I was very skeptical, but it's funny. So I was watching a little bit of it earlier this week again. It did feel like they had that thing set up for the entirety of the game because he fielded a couple of punts in what we would call the no field zone, right? You plant your heels at the 10 and you don't go back. There were a couple of times where he fielded punts that were inside the 10, and it was just hey, what are you doing? So I think they were setting that thing up for the entirety of the night, just hoping that he was going to be able to break one.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think they thought they could get that. All right. So Indiana already, and I know there's a lot of roster reshuffling that will happen here over the next, month or so. But Indiana, per ESPN, is the all too early number 1 team in America next year with Josh Hoover, the TCU quarterback, coming in to take over. Do you see it that way? I know you've already looked to and can't wait for 2026 to start. So, I was thinking Arch back to Texas, Ohio State still loaded, but Indiana as the preseason number 1 team in the country, is that what we're going to see in the coaches poll and the AP poll when it comes out mid-August?
Not a chance. They'll be top 5, I think, but Ohio State and Texas are going to be 1 and 2. When you have if you just look at Ohio State, for starters, with both of those programs, you have returning quarterbacks. And I tend to think that the top 25, the preseason stuff, does favor guys that are getting a second year in the system. It's not always the case, but I tend to think that they favor guys that are getting another year in their current system. So Julian Sayin at Ohio State, Arch at Texas, even CJ Carr at Notre Dame, Dante Moore at Oregon. I think those are going to be your top 5, Indiana being 5 of the bunch there. I think ESPN is just kind of jumping the ship a little bit with saying, hey, the Kurt Cignetti is the guy, and he is the guy. I think right now he's the most impressive coach in college football. There's a bunch of them that are at the top. It's Ryan Day is up there. Kirby is obviously up there. Kirby Smart at Georgia. But Cignetti is in that group because of what he was able to do. So I think they're giving him maybe just a little bit more than they should be, because I think some of these other rosters in 2026 are going to be far superior to what Indiana had, specifically Ohio State. I mean, they have the best player in the sport with Jeremiah Smith. And you're getting a quarterback that I'm hoping with Julian saying, I didn't think he was that good this year, to be honest. I think he got the Heisman nod because he was the quarterback of the team that was the best team in the country for majority of the season. There was a lot of underwhelming stuff when watching him, but I'm hoping in year number 2 as starting quarterback that you start to see some of that stuff fall to the wayside and you just get to see him go out there and throw the ball around the yard. So I think Ohio State will end up being the number 1 overall, the number 1 seed or number 1 in the preseason poll.
I'll tell you what, Josh Hoover's not Fernando Mendoza, but he's good. And they got that kid from Michigan State, Nick Marsh, to go there. So it'll be interesting. I mean, look, none of us, although you and I did kind of early in the season say Miami's got a chance to win the whole thing. But nobody had Indiana in the championship game before the season started last year. All right, put a bow on this college football season. Just great season, good season, okay season.
It was a good season. Yeah, I wouldn't say great, but it was a good season. I mean, you had a team that had never won a championship win a championship. You had a coach that many people were aware of, but I was talking about this last night. It actually felt like after year number 1 that more people were off on Kurt Cignetti than they were on, because he talked a lot in year number 1, and then when they played good teams, they didn't look the part. So the way that he was able to win everybody back, I thought was really impressive. But overall, I would say it was a good season. We've seen great seasons, and this just didn't feel like that to me, just because, well, there's a lot of reasons, but the main reason is the Heisman race didn't really feel that fun. Like it felt like a lot of it was the SEC doing their best to hype Diego Pavia up to make him be considered for the award, but we didn't see eye-popping numbers. This wasn't like a wide receiver coming out the way that Devontae Smith did. This wasn't Travis Hunter playing 2 different positions at the same time. We've seen some big numbers. It wasn't like a Jaden year. We've seen guys put up big numbers. Didn't really feel like that was the case this year. So I would say it was a good season. I think anytime you get a team like Indiana that kind of takes over the sports zeitgeist for a little bit because of how big the story is, it's certainly a positive for the sport. So I'd say a good season, not a great season.
All right. Fast forward to end of April. Washington's on the clock at number 7. David Bailey, Reuben Bain, and Caleb Downs are all available at number 7. Who's the pick?
I'm sprinting and taking David Bailey. Sprinting. I like the idea of Caleb Downs. I don't think Washington's defense is in a position right now to where they can afford passing up on a guy, assuming they think that David Bailey and Reuben Bain or either one of them is a legitimate game changer. I don't think they're in a position to pass up an edge guy. They can't get pressure on the quarterback. And while Downs is a great player, this to me, when I was sitting in for you on during the holidays, we took a little bit of calls on this, and people had said, well, what about the Kyle Hamilton situation a couple years ago? And I know hindsight is 20/20, but at that particular point in time, Washington had Chase Young and Montez Sweat on the roster. They were good at the edge spot. At least they thought they were. So you could have afforded to take in a really good safety at the spot that they did. Of course, Ron Rivera did not end up doing that, and Jahan Dotson looks great in Philadelphia Eagles green. Thank you for that, Ron. I just don't think that they're in a position right now to where they can get a safety at the number 7 pick when you need to have guys that can rush the passer, because it has been atrocious.
Okay.
Not just this year, but last year.
Who's the best player of the 3? Who's going to be the best NFL player of the 3?
I would say David Bailey or Caleb Downs. I think Reuben Bain would fall outside of that. I would say Bailey or Downs.
God, Bain was so good Monday night. So good.
He was. He's great at playing the run. I mean, sensational at playing the run.
He's definitely more of a two-way edge defensive end than Bailey is. But Bailey's, I think I'm with you. I really think they need a player that strikes fear into an offense, and Bailey is quick twitch and looks the part as an edge pass rusher, no doubt. All right, man. Thanks.
Yep. See ya.
Denton Day, everybody, at the Denton Day on X. Up next, Ben Standig. Then Doug Kammerer will jump on with us. We've got predictions. We've got previews of the game. I've already given out my smell test picks. The two dogs, Denver and the Rams. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, the team980.com. Don't forget, you can watch the show on the Team 980's YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button and hit the like button when you get there. If you are struggling right now with older windows and higher heating bills, I suggest you give Window Nation a call. 866-90-NATION or go to windownation.com right now. How about buying 4 and getting the next 4 windows free? How about not paying anything for those windows until the year 2028? 2 years interest-free with no money down required and no monthly payments. Replace your older builder-grade windows with custom-built high-quality windows from Window Nation. They get it right from the jump. The estimate process takes an hour or less. They're not going to hassle you after they leave you with a quote. You make the decision on your timeline. When they come to install your windows, they promise to do it in a day or less, and 96% of their installs require no follow-up service. Get your windows. Get them to protect your home, to beautify your home. Choose from over 1,500 styles and colors and get a lifetime warranty on whatever you purchase. You can relax knowing your home is protected far into the future and will be cozy, warm, and comfortable during cold winter days and nights. 866-90-NATION or windownation.com. Ben Standing's with us, as he is every Monday and Friday at 12 noon. I just saw this about Sean Payton. Sean Payton has coached 22 games in his coaching career without his starting quarterback. He's 14-8 in those games. And if you remove the 5 games with third or fourth string quarterbacks at the helm, he's 13-4. Over that same span, he's 87-48 with starting quarterbacks. He's actually better at 13-4 win percentage wise at 765 with backup quarterbacks than he is with starting quarterbacks over the last decade. I think that they're going to surprise on Sunday with Jarrett Stidham. Ben is with us. We'll start there. I want to get your thoughts on these 2 games. AFC Championship game. Do you give the Broncos a shot?
Yeah, I do. You know, if look, Stidham has not played in 2 years in an actual game, so you know any sense of what he is going to from a couple of years ago. But to me, he would have been one of those guys where maybe Mariota is sort of in the front of the class in terms of that spot starter, decent backup tier. I think Stidham's in that though, at least before. Like if you had told me like he would have been the guy to potentially start if Bo Nix wasn't ready, I'd been like, okay, I don't. Again, it's not ideal, but it's a puncher's chance and maybe a little bit more. Again, we haven't seen him in a couple of years, but Sean Payton is one of those coaches where I think he can beat. What was the old saying? Or I forget which college coach it was. Like somebody would describe it as he can beat you with his and he can beat
Bobby
you with
Bowden.
yours. Like
Bobby Bowden.
Okay. Yeah. And so like I feel like Sean Payton's one of those guys. So yeah, I definitely give New England a good chance. I mean Denver a good chance. Ironically, I feel like Denver's defense is what needs to really buck up a little bit. Not to say that it's been bad, but like it hasn't looked particularly dominant so far. And obviously we saw them here late in the season when Washington played them, and that was one of the better games that Washington's offense played. So I feel like Denver's defense needs to get ratcheted back up towards that, hey, we're the best defense in the league mode in order to keep New England down.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the Denver and Rams defenses, which have been at various times considered to be, top 3, top 4 defenses, along with Seattle and Houston. And by the way, the Patriots defense is lights out right now. But, I remember when they got absolutely annihilated by Jacksonville at home. That was a December game. I'm pretty sure it was a mid-December game. And then, they gave up 30 last week in 450 yards to Buffalo, even though Buffalo turned it over 5 times. They still had 450 yards of offense. Think about that. It always reminds me of that Philadelphia game here last year when Washington turned the ball over 5 times and still won, scoring 36 points. Buffalo turned the ball over 5 times last week and still scored 30 points and put up 450 yards. So it's a good point. Denver's defense not necessarily what it was recently. And I think you could say the same about the Rams defense.
Yeah, no, I agree. And also, look, I mean, credit to New England. Obviously, they are this year's Washington massive turnaround. And Drake May, he's the MVP. He's the runner-up. He's obviously had a great year. But I don't think he's played particularly great so far in the playoffs either. But, their circumstances have been, the Chargers are the Chargers, and C.J. Stroud was a mess for Houston, so it didn't matter as much. But if Denver, again, gets back to where their defense was earlier in the year and Drake May doesn't elevate his game, then this could be where the defense does really, give the Broncos a great edge. But, yeah, we'll have to see. And, right, same thing with the Rams. The weird thing with the Rams is it feels like they've had a lot of games this year where, things go super wrong late. Obviously, last week, it almost went super wrong when Caleb Williams throws a little bit of a Hail Mary pass to tie the game, and they were fortunate that the Rams obviously to come out with it, to come out with the win. But yeah, they need to ratchet it up a bit. But their defensive front is still so young and athletic. We saw them just dominate the Bears' run game last week, especially in short yardage situations. So they do have the pieces. They also have a lot of coaches on that side of the ball who are getting interviews, but coaches on both sides of the ball who are getting interviews for various jobs around the league. You always have to wonder, I think, how do guys, stay focused on what it is they're doing right now, knowing that their life could change potentially by getting one of these other jobs. So that's always at least something to consider.
Yeah, the back to the Drake May thing. I think he's made some really good throws that have been significant in their 2 wins, but he has put 6 balls on the ground, fumbles, lost 3 of them. He's got 2 interceptions, so he's got 5 turnovers. Now, one of them was the end of half Hail Mary. I don't really count those interceptions as real interceptions, when they're throwing a Hail Mary at the end of the half and it gets intercepted in the end zone. But they've been led by their defense. There's no doubt about that in this postseason, even though I do think he's some excellent big-time throws. I mean, 3 touchdown passes last week. One was on 4th down, and the other 2, I mean, those balls were perfect, and they were also simultaneously great catches by Diggs and Butte and Douglas. All right, so who are you picking in that game?
Well, I think I'm going to pick Denver. I'm not dismissing New England by any stretch, and obviously they may have a huge edge at quarterback depending on how Stidham looks. But I just feel like Denver with Sean Payton, he's going to find a way to get it done. And again, New England's offense, Drake May's made some great throws. By the way, that throw that NFL Films captured, the 1-2 Butte down the sideline, and he throws it like through the snow. That was a reminder of what NFL Films has done and can do. That was an incredible view. But I'll go Denver, something like 23-20.
All right, before we get to your pick on Rams Seahawks, are you one of those that believes that Stafford's Hall of Fame, bust still, requires more work?
Well, I think the younger version of me would probably say yes, but I feel like the bar has gotten a bit lower over time. So I do a little bit. I mean, he was always a fun quarterback in Detroit, from a fantasy football perspective. He put up good numbers, but obviously they didn't win a ton, and we can certainly blame the all things Lions, for that, not necessarily on him. But, obviously Detroit did turn things around once they got, when it became the Jared Goff show and they got other pieces, of course. So I don't know. If you tell me he gets in, okay, but I don't think it's a lock. I would say he's still sort of on the border.
I think it's a lock. And I understand the argument against, he's never even been, essentially in the running for an MVP. He only has 3 total Pro Bowls in his career, which is actually kind of an amazing thing. But, during those years, you had some pretty good quarterbacks that were ahead of him, and he was on some teams that weren't so good. But I know what I've watched. I've watched one of the all-time great competitors at the position. I've watched one of the all-time great clutch performers at the position. I know what they were in Detroit. I mean, they essentially had 2 players, him and Megatron, and yet they went to the playoffs 3 times. And then once he got with his first really good organization, I mean, he's been excellent. He's won a Super Bowl. He could potentially win a second one. He may be, on the verge of winning the MVP. I think he is. And to your point, it does seem like the bar gets a little bit lower, as we get older. It just seems that way. It seems like it's the hall of very, very good, not the greatest to ever play, but his career numbers are way up there. The Hall of Fame monitor thing that Pro Football Reference does has him, pretty much easily in the Hall of Fame ahead of a lot of other Hall of Fame quarterbacks. So I think he's in. I don't think he needs to, to win a second Super Bowl. I don't think he needs to. I think he might win another Super Bowl to go along with this MVP, but I don't think he needs to. I think what'll be interesting is if he does hang it up and they win the Super Bowl, who's the quarterback in LA next year for the Rams? Because it's not like they have, they don't have him on the roster right now, right? The backup quarterback who is the backup quarterback? Why am I blanking?
I'm blanking too. Is it Garoppolo?
Oh, Garoppolo. It's Garoppolo. Stetson Bennett's Garoppolo's ahead of Stetson Bennett,
He
right?
is. Yes, he is.
Yes. Yeah, so I'm with you. Well,
anyway.
and look, that's the thing about having a guy like Sean McVay is if some quarterback, just the way Stafford did, if some quarterback is potentially on the move or can force his way out, that's where you want to go. Not only is it McVay, but obviously Puka Nacua is unbelievable, and you still have Devontae Adams. So highly attractive if there is a quarterback or two that somehow is available. It's become more that way in recent years. Typically, historically, these guys never moved out of their markets unless the team wanted them to. But now, like Stafford, a little bit more movement.
Remember, we're not that far removed from last offseason. The first few months of that offseason, the Rams and Stafford were at odds. There was a chance Stafford wasn't going to play for the Rams this year without getting the contract extension and the contract figured out. That was kind of odd. Remember, we were like, are the Rams really going to move on from Stafford? And there were injuries. There was the back injury. There was a lot going on there in the offseason. So how do you see Seattle and the Rams?
Yeah, I think this is of the two. This is certainly the game of the weekend. Division foes, throw out the records, all that stuff. But on top of it, they're both, exceptional teams. Seattle may be the most balanced team in the whole league this season, ranking, very high in offense, defense, and special teams and DVOA. But Sam Darnold is the quarterback, and, he's a bit of an up and down quarterback to say the least. How does he handle the pressure? I mean, look, it's 2 years in a row now where his teams have won a ton of games. He's put up really good numbers. I'm not questioning him. It's just like, okay, when the pressure hits, what's he going to do? The Seahawks lost one of their two running backs, Zach Charbonnet, with a knee injury. So that takes away some of that dynamic where you can alleviate some of the pressure. Kenneth Walker had a very good game last week, but he's been, I think a bit underwhelming. Again, this is maybe my fantasy football brain, a bit underwhelming at times. But, of course, Jackson Smith and Jigba going up against that secondary. We did see Emmanuel Forbes have some success against Njigba earlier in the year. But Seattle is fantastic. But all that said, I'm going to go with the Rams even on the road. I just, the Stafford part of it, as we discussed, Nacua is unreal. And, I do think their defense has enough pieces to get it done. I just think the key is if this game is, one possession game into the fourth quarter, I'm just going to trust the Rams to find a way to get it done more than I am Seattle. But again, Mike McDonald, their defensive coordinator, is obviously looking like one of the better coaches in the league. Their secondary is off the charts. So this should be a really fun game, but I'll go Rams, something along the lines of like 27-24.
27-24 Rams. All right. Coordinator search, defensive coordinator search. Where do you think we are? I mean, Albrecht's not coming. Brian Flores isn't coming. Raheem's going to probably have a lot of options if he doesn't get a head coaching job. The Cowboys just selected and hired Christian Parker from Philadelphia's staff to be their new DC. Are we going to end up with a first-time defensive coordinator in Washington, like a Carl Scott or somebody like that, or not?
Well, they have a lot of guys who've been defensive coordinators that they've interviewed. There was this one this morning that got mentioned that Terrell Austin, the DC with the Steelers, is added to the list now of guys that they have met with. I mean, Pittsburgh's defense wasn't exactly strong this year, but sure, you never know. So Scott is very intriguing. He was with Nick Saban for several years at Alabama. Now he's been at Seattle. If you take somebody from someone's system, you don't bring the head guy, but you hopefully bring somebody who's absorbed what that defense is doing. And taking somebody from Mike McDonald's defense in Seattle would seem to be a pretty reasonable way to go. So if it's not now, or I feel like Carl Scott will be a DC at some point. So it could be him, but everybody else they've interviewed, I believe, has got some sort of defensive coordinator nod. You would think that Jonathan Gannon would hypothetically be the top of the list of remaining options now that Brian Flores is gone, and it looks like Jim Schwartz, I assume, is staying in Cleveland. So, all that I don't know where he goes, though. I mean, he's only interviewed for a handful of jobs. One was Dallas. They just filled up theirs. A spot one was Green Bay. Green Bay is now open. And, of course, Green Bay has got Micah Parsons and some other pieces, so that would seem to be way more attractive than Washington at a minimum. But, yeah, you've got guys like Patrick Graham, who's the DC with the Raiders, but he spent several years with Belichick in New England. I feel like Denard Wilson, he's been DC with Titans the last 2 years. You know, obviously, statistically, they don't look particularly impressive, but in 2024, they were actually one of the better defenses in the league against the pass. And he's a guy of local ties, went to DeMatha, went to Maryland. So, you know, whatever that is worth, I think he's going to get a DC position somewhere. Could be here, could be not. But, you know, and then there's Al Harris, who has not been a defensive coordinator before, but he's got the Dan Quinn ties. So seemingly that would be the easiest transition schematically. He also was part of the Dallas defense when Quinn was there, and they were, you know, constantly having defensive backs. 2 defensive backs led the league in interceptions in different seasons, and now he goes to the Bears, and the Bears lead the league with 23 interceptions. So all this ball is life talk that never really translated here. Maybe Al Harris was the missing piece, but again, he has not been a coordinator before. He also has been interviewed by Green Bay, and as a player, that's where he thrived. He's, I believe, in the Packers Hall of Fame. So if there's a nostalgia pull for them, that could be where Harris ends up. So, you know, they've got options, but I've been wondering this whole time, are coaches looking at Washington as a place that they want to go, or are they looking at it as, I don't know where Dan Quinn's, you know, status is, if this is a bad year, or am I out of a job, you know, out again? So I think that's a question in terms of, like, maybe some guys would decline Washington, but I haven't heard that they're getting turned down by people quite yet.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, but I also think that there's just better, you know, rosters defensively.
100%.
Like almost every other one that is out there and available. So that probably speaks to it. But so Terrell Austin, you know, been in Pittsburgh with Mike Tomlin the last 4 years, was in Detroit, started his career there. He's the latest to interview. Obviously, you know, 9 years or whatever it is defensive with defensive coordinator experience. I mean, right now, lean in one direction, somebody who's done it before or somebody who hasn't, in terms of where they end up.
Well, I would like to think it's tricky. I mean, I'm not trying to waffle. Again, when you have David Blau, you would think you don't want another first-time coordinator, and Blau isn't just a first-time coordinator. He's got, you know, minimal experience. So you'd think that Quinn's going to be focusing a lot more time there. But simultaneously, if you bring in a defensive coordinator who's not done this before, like a Harris, you know, that provides another challenge for the head coach, except that Harris, in theory, would be schematically more in line with what Dan Quinn's been doing. So Harris kind of is like the best case of the never been defensive coordinator bid, but by the numbers, they have more guys in the mix for a coordinator. So I don't know. If you tell me Al Harris, I probably would guess he's the top guy, but in totality, they just have more guys who have that experience. So it feels like it's Al Harris. I would say Al Harris or bust, because I don't know that's to be the case on any level. But, you know, it just feels like if Dan Quinn wants to keep his defense to some degree, he goes with Harris if he can.
All right. Thanks. Enjoy the football this weekend. We'll talk on Monday, maybe with a defensive coordinator in the fold, maybe not. We'll see. Appreciate it.
Well, I'm sure you already did this, but tell me for my personal self, how much snow am I getting here?
Well, we're gonna get to that. You can tune in to the Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980 and the Team980.com. Doug Kammerer is coming up in about 10 minutes, and we'll make our own snow predictions coming up in the last half hour of the show. It's going to be a lot of weather, a lot of predictions. So, you know, grab some coffee like you usually do right around this time of day, and tune in. By the way, the forecast it keeps changing. It just keeps changing. I can't wait to hear what Doug says. We'll see.
All right. Well, I'm definitely tuning in because that's all I care about right now. See ya.
See ya. Ben Standig, everybody. We'll do a quick preview of both games when we come back, and then Doug Kammerer will jump on with us to give us the latest on the storm. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
All right, Kev, it's time. Championship weekend. Got the Broncos hosting the New England Patriots. Jarrett Stidham starting for Denver. What do you got here?
I saw the list of quarterbacks who made their first start of a season in a playoff game.
His fifth start ever, by the way.
I'm sorry?
His fifth start ever?
Yes. Yeah. And so there are 6 previous examples of a quarterback getting his first start of a season in a playoff game. And one of those happened actually here. Actually, 2 of them happened here, but one of them happened here with our own player. Taylor Heineke's first start in the 2020 COVID season was against Tampa Bay in the postseason, and he played great. He played great in that game. Connor Cook started for the Raiders in a wild card round game against the Texans and lost. Joe Webb in a wild card game for the Vikings back in 2012, lost 24-10. Frank Reich, people will remember this one. It was the greatest comeback in NFL history in the moment. He also owned the greatest comeback in college football history simultaneously, with Maryland coming from behind in 84 to beat Miami down in the Orange Bowl. But he engineered the comeback from 35-3 down to beat the Oilers in a wild card game in Buffalo, 41-38. Gary Danielson got his first start of the year in a divisional round game against the 49ers in 83. By the way, the next week, the 49ers came to Washington for the NFC title game. And Roger Staubach, the great Roger Staubach, in the 72 championship game at RFK, got his first start of the season. He actually had come in the week before in San Francisco for Craig Morton, led an unbelievable comeback, and he got the start. Washington won that game. Now, Staubach had been a quarterback with Morton. They had alternated series, alternated all kinds of things going back to the Super Bowl that they had won the year before. So not exactly comps for Jarrett Stidham. Heineke had played a little bit of football, hadn't started. Reich had played football. Danielson had played some football. But this is a first. But I trust some really good football minds. Belichick, McDaniels, they drafted him. McDaniels took him to Vegas. And Sean Payton's first move as the head coach in Denver was to sign Jarrett Stidham as a free agent. I think he's going to play well. I think their home environment is very, very, very tough to play in. I like the Broncos to win the game outright. I've already given them out as a smell test pick plus 4.5. I think this is a game, by the way, if May doesn't protect the football like he hasn't in the first 2 playoff games, it will doom them. But I'm also so impressed with New England's defense and New England's playmaking ability and New England's coaching. This is a great matchup. It's too bad Bo Nix isn't playing. But I'm going to go against sort of conventional thought in this one. I'm going to pick the home team to pull off the upset over New England. Denver, and by the way, more high scoring than you think. Denver, 27. New England, 24.
When you said higher scoring than people expected, I really thought that you were going to balloon over my total that I had set. I've got the final score 24-20, and I'm going to give it to the Denver Broncos. I just think that Denver defense is so damn good, but at the same time, they're just the trenches is so built out for the Broncos. They have the best offensive line. Jarrett Stidham's going to have a ton of time to throw. If the Patriots do decide to just kind of sit back in zone, he's going to have a lot of time to be able to pick them apart. So they're going to have to force him to make mistakes in the secondary. But I mean, if you're trying to blanket guys in zone coverage, it's hard, man. So yeah, give me the Denver Broncos 24-20.
You mentioned, remember yesterday when we did our top 5 players of the weekend, you had Christian Gonzalez in that 5 spot. And I said, I'm going to go with last year's defensive player of the year, Pat Surtain, in the 5 spot. But this is going to be, if you're Stidham, you don't have many options. Both Gonzalez and Davis are outstanding corners. So they've got to be able to run the football a little bit with R.J. Henry. And I did see that J.K. Dobbins has a chance to play this weekend. Did you see that?
Yes, I have seen him posting and hinting at the
That would be
possibility.
big. That would be really
could
big
be
because
huge
he
for him.
really looked good and was a big part of why they were winning a lot of games in the early to mid portion of the season. So I look, Henry had some good runs last week. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting situation. RJ Harvey had some good runs last week. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, good games. Weather could be a factor. Cold with snow showers as a possibility. I'm going Denver outright. All right, next one.
All right, next up, we got the big rematch. Rams going up to Seattle. We all remember the big Thursday night game where the Seahawks won it on that 2-point conversion. Now the Rams attempt to get back even, well, I guess to get a leg up on the Seahawks going into the Super Bowl. So who do you got here, Kev?
Low possession game. Both teams move the football. Both teams grind it out more than you would expect. I know that Matt Stafford threw for 457 in the 38-37 loss. I mean, he carved up Seattle's defense. But I think this is a Kyron Williams versus Kenneth Walker III, both offensive line game. I think the teams have to look at trying to possess the football. The Rams defense has given up, chunk plays and big plays, obviously in both of their playoff wins. And, towards the end of the season, even to Atlanta on Monday Night Football, they gave up some big chunk plays. Their defense hasn't been the same. They've got to run the football. They cannot get away from that. They got away from that against Chicago, and it almost cost them. It's not easy to run it against Seattle. Seattle is a very good defensive team, but I think this is the key to the game. The team that is able to run the football is going to win the football game because you've got two excellent backs. I do think Seattle's going to miss Charbonnet. Charbonnet's the banger. He is really good in short yardage. He's been excellent for them in the red zone. I think it is, a big miss. Even though I think Kenneth Walker III is the better of the two backs overall, but they've been a very good tandem, and he's got like 14 touchdowns, I think, on the year, something like that. So I think that's going to be a miss. But to me, the team that's able to run the football, and don't be surprised if both teams have success running the football, and that may end up creating a lower possession game, a faster moving game. Team with the ball last wins. I'm going Rams 23-20.
Ooh. Yeah, so I've got the Rams winning this one 21-18. I do think it's going to come down to that run game, but man, Seattle's defense is so good. Both these defenses are really well coached and really good.
What was your score? 20-18?
21-18, yeah. I think
21-18.
I think it's going to be close and tight. Yeah, I think it's going to be a tight one. These two teams have played each other neck and neck the entire way, and they've really matched each other's games. Because if you look at the first one, it was low scoring and a lot of running the ball. I think Matt Stafford had like a game high of 150 something passing yards or somewhere around there. They just play to each other's level, and so I think it's just gonna be a very, very tight one coming down the stretch. But I do think the Rams edge out the Seattle Seahawks.
All right, Championship Sunday will be certainly around here about football, but also about the weather. Doug Kammerer with the latest on not just this storm, but looking ahead, we could be going through this next weekend as well. More on that next. Doug Kammerer from Channel 4 will join us. All right, here we go, boys and girls. The big one this weekend. Man, the forecast is going to be difficult for people who get paid to make it. I don't really get paid to make it. I get paid to just observe. But one of my favorites when it comes to forecasting these big events is Channel 4's Doug Kammerer. He is with us right now. Follow him on X at Doug Kammerer. Watch him on NBC4, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 11 o'clock. Usually comes on right about, the 15 to 18 mark, and then the 45 to 48 mark later in the hour, twice an hour. Although I think he'll be at the top of every newscast tonight, tomorrow, weekend. I don't even know what your schedule is this weekend. What is your schedule this weekend? You're obviously not going to Park City, which was the plan.
That was the plan.
So that was the plan, but it's been nixed, clearly.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So what's your schedule? Are you going to be in every day?
What's that?
Are you going to be on Saturday and Sunday or not?
I am. Yeah. I'll be here tonight. I'll be here tomorrow night. I'll be here on Sunday night. Yeah, I'm here, man.
All right. So let's take it one storm at a time. Did you see the GFS for next weekend?
Why are you scaring your producers and everybody else already with next week?
I know, but did you see it? I'm just asking you. Did you see it?
Can we get through this week first?
We're going to do that. But that one looks. I mean, by the way, the Canadian agrees with it too. All right, we'll take it one at a time.
Those are the two worst models out there.
I know they are. I really feel
I'll
for
tell
you.
I'll tell you, it's not out of the realm of possibility because, as you know, this is the exact pattern that we need. We got a deep trough in the eastern half of the nation. You get a little piece of energy that moves along that trough down towards the Gulf and picks up all that moisture and moves into that cold air, and you got yourself a snowstorm. So it's not out of the realm of possibility.
All right, let's look at this weekend because I do feel for you. This is a really difficult. People, just so you understand, the waffling on forecasts that you guys think you're hearing, it's based on information changing. This is going to be really difficult. So spell it out for us. Let's start with the start time and the precipitation type when it starts.
Yeah, and we got to remember, and I want to make sure all the viewers and listeners out there remember too. I mean, we're looking at this thing. I've seen this storm now for 10 days out. I've been looking at this time frame over the last 10 days and said, hey, look, this time frame we could see a storm, and then it comes and you start to look at it 7 days out, and you go, okay, now we're talking about a major snowstorm. Looks like it might stay south of us, and now it's trending a little bit farther to the north, and that's what happens with these storms. There's a reason why I never put out my own snow totals until 48 hours out. And I just put mine out last night. Everybody was talking about the Apple app was talking 18 to 23 inches for DC. And that was on Saturday, or that was on Sunday into Monday.
Yeah.
I mean, my daughter is up in Canada at a ski trip, and she's calling me going, Dad, are we getting out of school all next week because 18 to 23 inches is coming? I'm like, whoa. Let's just hold your horses. The answer to that now is yes, you are getting out of school most of next week, but it's not 18 to 23 inches. So this thing comes in tomorrow night. The first thing that comes in tonight, and everybody needs to be aware of this, is the cold. So we've got a cold weather advisory tonight. That is because we're going to have wind chills overnight into early tomorrow morning below zero. So we're talking about 5 to 10 degrees below zero. So this is some extreme cold we've got working its way in here. That sets the stage for our storm, which moves in during the day on Saturday. And then we start to see the snow, most likely, I'm thinking around 10, 11 o'clock tomorrow night. And then it snows overnight, becomes heavy. We're talking 1 to 2 inches per hour right on through the morning hours. And I think by 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, that's when things get gray. And what I mean by that is that's when the forecast completely changes for Gaithersburg or Waldorf. All of a sudden, everybody's getting something different. And that's why this is so hard, because if this was all snow for everybody, this would be a pretty easy forecast. But because we're seeing some warmer air move in aloft, and by aloft, we're talking 5 to 10,000 feet. Now we're introducing ice into the picture, but not everybody's going to get the same amount of ice. Not everybody's going to get the same type of ice. And this is where it's really, really tough. And as you and I were talking about the other day, this turns into a nowcasting issue.
Yeah.
So I can forecast this all I want. I am not going to get, if somebody says, like, I'm in Bethesda, right? I'm in Bethesda area. I am not going to get Bethesda 100% right. I'm not. We do not have the capability to do that yet. But I can tell you what we're going to get. We're going to get about 6 to 10 inches of snow, and then we're going to get ice. And I think in the Bethesda area, it's going to be mostly sleet. But if we get a little bit warmer, a little bit lower in the atmosphere, next thing you know, you have freezing rain. And freezing rain is by far the worst thing we can do. We can deal with sleet. Sleet doesn't stick to trees. It doesn't stick to power lines. But freezing rain sticks to everything. And then you run into power outages. So that's my concern moving forward. And the best chance for freezing rain is our southern zone. So you're talking about areas from 50 south. So southern Maryland, you're talking about areas like Woodbridge, Quantico, Fredericksburg. Those areas have a much better chance of getting freezing rain and a much better chance of power outages with this storm. Where areas well to the north and west, I'd say north of Clarksburg and north of Leesburg, you may not see much in the way of, you may see some sleet, but this is mostly a snow event.
You know, before we get to the mix and, you know, the type, and nobody wants freezing rain, but it looks like this could be an issue, certainly in some spots. You know, the initial thump of, 10 o'clock Saturday night until sometime Sunday morning, to late Sunday morning to Sunday afternoon, depending on when the change takes place based on where you live. You said we could be at 1 to 2 inches per hour. So the other thing that's hard for you guys sometimes to predict is where the banding, where the 2 inches per hour sets up versus the 1 inch per hour. And that makes a big difference. So what are you thinking in terms of, for that first, call it, 10 to 12 hours of the storm, where do you see the heaviest banding setting up? Do you have any clue at this point?
Yeah, I think the heaviest banding is going to set up closer to that warm nose of air coming in. So that means it's going to set up in our southern zones right along. And I really do think it's going to be right along the D.C. area. I think the D.C. area is going to get that thumping first. And then we're going to see that move to the north, that heavier snow move to the north. But I really do think it's going to be right around, say, Warrenton to Manassas to DC to Annapolis that gets into that heaviest thumping of that 1 to 2 inches, and then you'll see that slowly move to the north. So I think by the time we get 8 o'clock in the morning, I think the DC region, DMV, wakes up to probably at least 4 inches of snow by 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, and then we get another potential 4 inches of snow. So that puts us right around 8 inches at the airport. I think Dulles comes in around 9, maybe 10 inches of snow by that point, and then it changes over to sleet. And then hopefully it stays sleet because we're going to get a good amount of sleet. We're going to get whatever ice we get, we're getting a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch of ice. Sleet, once again, we can deal with. It actually adds traction to the roads, where freezing rain is not something you want to deal with. And anything over 1/4 of an inch of freezing rain, we got some big issues.
Doug, previously, and tell me if this is still the case, the cold air damming, the CAD, which comes in, east of the mountains, always gets underdone, I think, by the models. They don't see that entrenched cold air, that wedge of cold air that'll stay there at the surface for a longer period of time. I know we're talking about upper levels of the atmosphere with the change to sleet, but do we still have that issue with the models with cold air being understated on the model runs?
Yeah, well, okay. So for example, if we have, a lot of times the models will warm us up faster.
Exactly.
But that's at the surface because
I was going to ask,
rises.
So does that ever happen in the other levels of the atmosphere?
No,
could they be overdoing the warm air at the upper levels?
Yeah, it happens the opposite. So you actually get, if the warm nose is expected to come in, say around, let's say I'm thinking it's going to come in around 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
And we're going to start to see sleet around 2 o'clock. Most of the time in our area, it comes in earlier.
Got it.
So that cuts down on our snowfall totals.
Yeah.
So that's
your concern. That's a big concern for you.
Yeah, because and that's why I went. I'm lower than a lot of people. I'm definitely lower than the National Weather Service. You know, I'm definitely lower than some of the other TV stations now. I'm going 6 to 10 inches in the city, and then I'm going 10 to 14 inches to the north and west. If north and west stays all snow, and I've said this today, I think we could get upwards of 16 to 18 inches of snow up that way. Right. Because the ratios are going to be very high, especially north and west of there. And that, the ratios, as you know, but for the listeners here, the ratios mean normally for an inch of rain, you get 10 inches of snow. And in a case like this, you could get 15 inches of snow for an inch of rain. So the drier the air is, the colder it is, the easier it is to get your snow puffy and fluffy, and the fluffy snow tends to amount to more.
Considering that we are still 48 hours away from the changeover, mix or the changeover, within a few hours, can the track and the models change to where your 10 to 14 plus all snow bullseye ends up over us?
At this point, not really.
Okay.
We know we're getting the warm air in here. It's just a matter of what time. Now the difference is now in a matter of hours. So, if it comes in, like right now, I'm really thinking it comes in around noon. If it comes in at 3 in the afternoon, then that 3 hours is an extra 3 hours of snow at a pretty good thumping. So yeah, you could add in another 3 or 4 inches. So, that is definitely a possibility. If it comes in a little bit earlier, you're cutting those snow totals down pretty quickly. So, and I think that's a better chance than the other direction.
Yeah, you hate that, and I hate that too. And by the way, overall, it would be better for everybody if it was all snow. Although your point about sleet and better traction is a good one. It's just you end up with that crust a little bit. It gets a little harder to shovel because sleet's a lot heavier.
Well, yes. And for those people that are going to be shoveling and you're going to shovel early in the morning on Sunday, because you're going to, shovel that 4 or 5 inches, get that off of there. I mean, you'll be able to sweep that because it's going to be so light and fluffy. But when that sleet starts, that's going to add some significant weight to that snow. So at that point, it's going to be very hard to begin to move off.
Doug Kammerer, everybody from Channel 4. He also does some really good work on Facebook, so follow him on Facebook as well. So once it changes over, give me when we start to see the precipitation end, and is there a chance it goes back to snow at the end?
No, there will not go back to snow at the end. Of the warm air just continues to surge up across our area, and it's really over by Sunday night, 10 o'clock-ish. Gets out of here. The coastal low starts to develop and kind of steals the moisture from the backside of the system. A lot of times, if that coastal low was forming earlier, like it looked like it was going to a couple of days ago, then we would keep the backside of the storm here, and we would get more snow on the backside. But that's not going to happen this time.
So we could see, based on your projection, we could see easily 10 hours potentially of non-snow precipitation. What's the worst case on the freezing rain?
Yeah, and this is where I get a little worried about it, because the worst case for freezing rain, and the European actually has upwards of 0.6 to 0.75 of an inch of freezing rain. Now, I think that's overdone. The European tends to overdo that a little bit. But if we were to get even a 0.5 inch of freezing rain in the metro, we're going to see a lot of power outages. And I do think we're going to get that somewhere. I think Southern Maryland, if you're Calvert County, Charles County, maybe Southern Prince George's, your St. Mary's County, Stafford County, south of that area, I think you've got a really good chance of seeing some pretty good power outages in that area. So I would definitely recommend everybody stock up and make sure you're ready for power to go out. I know for me, I made sure, I've got my lighting ability if my power goes out. The only thing I'm worried about, honestly, is heat, because if power goes out and we don't have a way to heat the house, that's going to be a major issue for us, because we're going into the freezer after this.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some of your forecasted lows for the week. We're talking about single digits, people in the city. And when Doug talks about, warming the temperatures are warming up, he's not talking about at the surface. We're going to be, you can tell everybody, but we're not approaching 32 degrees at any point anytime soon.
No, and all next week, we've got temperatures below freezing. This might just be our entire 10-day forecast is below freezing. So this might just be one of, if not the coldest 10-day stretches we've ever had as far as staying below freezing goes. So the number of days below freezing is going to be approaching some near record levels as well.
What's your biggest concern other than the freezing rain? I'm talking more about your forecast right now. What's your biggest concern?
My biggest concern is always that warm nose coming in too soon. So right now I'm predicting, snow to start 10 or 11. It's light until 2, 3 in the morning, and it really picks up. And I have it going until about noon. So that's 9 hours of an inch an hour at least. Yeah. And, so that gives us our 9, 10 inches. If that warm nose comes in here by 10, and that cuts off the heaviest snow, that's when it's 1 to 2 inches per hour and cuts that off. My forecast from 6 to 10 all of a sudden looks like 4 to 6. And people are saying, what's going on here?
Yeah, and a lot of ice.
So that's the biggest concern. The thing about it is, though, it does the impacts, and we feel comfortable about this. The impacts are the same. We're not going to be able to, drive. Schools are going to be out most of the week, if not the entire week. If let's say we get 5 inches of snow at the airport, but then we end up getting an inch of sleet and a half an inch of freezing rain. I mean, that is a recipe for disaster. So we would much rather
with the temperatures.
Yeah. We'd much rather this be 20 inches of snow. We'd be able to move the snow. You can't move ice. It's just too hard to move ice. And even if they treat the roads, it doesn't work under 26 degrees, I believe, 26, 28 degrees. It doesn't work. So,
Monday night Monday night the temperature in the city is going to be what?
Monday night is probably down to between 5 and 10 degrees.
Yeah.
Yeah, temperature, right? And then wind chill is even colder. Tuesday morning, we're talking about near record low temperatures. Record low in D.C. is 5. And I think we could be very close to that.
The National Weather Service has upgraded everybody now to a winter storm warning. Doug has through the metro area 6 to 10, and then the mix to sleet and hopefully not freezing rain. South and east 5 to 8 plus with the mix to sleet, and then probably freezing rain. And where it stays close to all snow, we're talking about a foot plus, north and west. Do you want to really quickly mention what's on the maps for the end of next week or not?
Well, and I want to mention one other thing here. So if those areas to the south, everybody's under the winter storm warning. The areas to the south, you may get upgraded to an ice storm warning. If you get an ice storm warning, you have to be ready for power outages. I was at Strauss-Snyder's today, and boy, that place was packed. And I had people that were, pointing at me and giving me the evil eye, and then other people thanking me, which was great. But everybody was there, and they were getting ready. So we'll see. I will say this though, you'll appreciate this story. So this lady's asking me in line. She's like, "So how bad do you think the ice is going to be?" And a guy behind me is like, "It's going to be bad. We're going to get a lot of ice." And I'm like, looking at the guy, and she asked me a different question, and he answers that question. And I'm like, obviously he doesn't watch NBC4.
Right. Yeah.
I'm like,
that's funny.
She's like, "Do you not know who this is?" And he's like, "We're going to get a ton of ice. We're all losing power." I'm like, I slow down. I don't.
Well, hopefully you walked to Bradley Food and Beverage, got a good sandwich, and went back to work. I will be in contact with you. I know this is a big challenge and a big weekend for all of you guys. Good luck with everything, and we'll talk about next week's storm next week.
Yes.
We'll save that one.
Buddy. See you later.
All right, thanks, Doug.
Stay safe, everybody.
Appreciate it. Doug Kammerer, everybody. Watch him all weekend long. I'm kind of with him. I mean, this warm air aloft, I think we're going to end up with, somewhere in that 6 to 12 inch range in the metro area. And then hopefully it's just sleet not freezing rain. Freezing rain, not fun. That's the rain that falls and freezes on power lines and tree limbs and the whole thing. That's not what we want. We don't want power outages. Do you have a prediction, Max?
Yeah, my prediction is that it's going to be about 7 inches of snow, and then the rest of it's going to be ice, and it's going to be hellacious out there. So be prepared, stay safe, and keep your cars on.
Yeah. Stay safe for sure. And by the way, God, if we get freezing rain and we get power outages with 2 football games on,
ooh, people are going to be mad.
That's not good either. All right, everybody.
Your antennas.
Back on. I'm planning on being here Monday. We'll see how that works out. Enjoy it. Chris is next.